Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm good afternoon to all of you. I'm Neha Tiwari, and it's my privilege to welcome you all on behalf of NIT University's Center for Innovation, Incubation, and Entrepreneurship. It is so very wonderful to see you all gathered online for the second NIIT Edtech Growth Summit. This summit is an initiative under NIIT Group's Edtech Growth Program designed to support promising Edtech startup founders in their growth journeys. With this program, early stage innovative Edtech startups have a win-win opportunity to be a part of an ecosystem being nurtured by the NIIT Group that created and scaled the Indian IT skilling industry over the last 4 decades. Many of the bright students of NIT universities are also involved in organizing this EdTech Growth Program initiative. The first edition of the EdTech Growth Program 2022 received a great response from the EdTech startup founders. Out of the startups who registered for the virtual summit, we invited 9 promising EdTech startups for the Founders Growth Camp 2022, which resulted in positive outcomes for these startups. We at NU believe that entrepreneurship opens opportunities for people to understand the new ways of managing a business from a global perspective and how to use the latest technology available for humanity's benefit. NU's academic ethos centers on a symbiotic relationship with the industry. This EdTech Growth Program has sprouted from NU's Center for Innovation, Incubation, and Entrepreneurship, where the students are managing this event under the aegis of faculty mentors. An array of events shall unfold with the insightful keynote speeches, followed by brainstorming panel discussions and fireside chats. May I now request Professor Rajesh Khanna, President, NIT University, to formally welcome the dignitaries.
Thank you, Neha. It's my privilege and my pleasure both to welcome all of you to this second EdTech Growth Summit. And as a university, we are in a unique position to be talking to the industry, talking to the parents, talking to teachers, academia, sources of knowledge, and also aspiring young minds. And that is where the key is. If these young minds get the muscle of innovation and learn from people who have already done it, and also find their own ways of doing things which the others have failed. So it's a very, very exciting place where academia, industry, and the corporate world, and all the ingredients that go into ensuring success and growth are there. So it's my pleasure and obligation to see that this ecosystem of innovation and growth, especially in the sector of EdTech, happens at NU. So thank you, Neha. I welcome you all again.
Thank you, sir. I have the honor of inviting Mr. Rajendra Singh Pawar, Chairman and Co-founder, NIIT Group. He is the recipient of Padma Bhushan Award. His contribution to the development of India's IT industry have been widely acknowledged. May I now request Mr. Pawar for his keynote speech on the past, present, and future of EdTech. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Neha, and thanks, Rajesh, for setting the context and for inviting everybody. So, as Neha mentioned, this is the second cycle, should we say, of this EdTech Summit, followed by EdTech Growth Camp. And I'm personally delighted to be involved with this. I have quite obviously done the journey, starting very long back, but now I'm excited to see the new journey of young people who are putting their shoulder to the very fundamental subject of education. So there's 42 years of experience. And so when I talk of past, it's a very long past, but I'll keep that session short, and the present, where we are now, and of course, taking a look into the future. So let me break up this last 42 years into the first 25 years. That is 1982 till 2007. And I'll touch on how that panned out, and then go to which I call the past. And from 2007, I'm using that term for the present for a set of reasons which I'll explain. And I'll touch upon the last 15 years or so, which I'm terming as the period called the present, and what have been the highlights. But quite clearly, the objective is to talk about the future. But I am one of the believers that you can't build a future if you forget your past. So it's important to know the past, the lessons from the past. So let me begin by talking of the period between 82 and 2007, which I'm terming as the past. And I'm labeling this period as from tech ed to edtech. That's the caption of this part. So we started in December 81, set up the company 81, started operations in 82. And we realized as NIIT, we were going to build talent for a sector which was just getting born. And we realized that there was a shortage of people to run the computers that India was going to make. And if there's a shortage of that talent, then who's going to train them? Because you don't have software professionals, then you're unlikely to have enough faculty, because the best of the faculty would be attracted by the big IT companies or computer companies, then to use that term. So we realized that if we had to build talent, we had to use technology. And technology at that time was basically color TV and video. And of course, the state of the art then also was the overhead projectors where you put flipped foils to be able to communicate what you wanted to rather than do the chalk and talk. And this area then became the cutting edge of technology, that video aided instruction. And around that time, people were dabbling, and we were also dabbling with the use of computers in learning. And NCRT had a very bright professor, Jalaluddin, who was also dabbling with that area. So we interacted with them a lot and started looking at how to use computers in the classroom. In fact, around that time, NCRT had received a big gift of the Acorn computers from BBC Micro, as it was called, made by Acorn as a company in UK. And these were beginning to get experimented with in a few schools. And in this setting is when NIIT started expanding its operation. And the 80s created a huge demand. We saw our expansion take us into the metros first. And then we realized the growth was exceeding our capacity, and therefore we innovated. Usage of technology was only one, but then even the business model innovation had to be done. And we thought of creating partners who were people like us, whom we could help set up their operations in smaller cities. And the term franchising was common, but we always use the word business partner for a reason. But we went from the few centers in the metros all the way eventually in the next 2 decades to about 2,000 centers in up to 40 countries at peak. And I recall that 1999 was a period when government was also deeply concerned about the digital divide. And we were called upon to participate, and then we created the first of the boots, build, own, operate, own and transfer model to work along with government, in addition to our centers all over the country and all over the world, to work with government schools in the smaller towns and villages and teach them IT. And that was a very successful, one of the early successes in the public-private partnership model. And over the next decade, having started in 99, we trained more than 11 million children in about 26,000 schools, covering most states of the country. In fact, that was also the time when when the dot-com bust happened, 2001, very important milestone in that journey. The concern about digital literacy was around. People realized lots was going to happen. There was the whole talk of Y2K and the huge excitement about it. And also the recognition that India had to solve the digital divide problem. And then it was up to leaders also to say, and I remember that we, in 2001, soon after the dot-com bust, we decided that we should educate leaders as well. And I recall the time in the Parliament House where we did a training program for parliamentarians. Well, there were many welcoming people, but the key achievement for our team then was to go into the Legislative Assembly of West Bengal, which many people remember were the ones who were opposing computerization, and do a training program for all the legislators of West Bengal at that time. So we did all of these things, and alongside a whole industry had got created by then, people participating in this period. And then, of course, post the dot-com bust, there was some kind of shakeout at that time because there had been too much of a mushrooming, and there was kind of range of quality, and then people selected. And we arrived, the internet had arrived, but internet was very slow. But by the early years, by the mid-2000s, it was becoming sensible, reasonable speeds. And then we saw, and I took 2007 as a point to say the present, because the internet started becoming an important vehicle. And many of you recall the MOOCs came around that time. The term was coined, I think, in 2008 by two professors in Canada, George Siemens being one of them, and Dave Cormier, I think, was the other one. And they coined this term for massive open, online open courses. And I timestamped the present from the period of the MOOCs, so connected knowledge, as they called it, the coming of Khan Academy 2008, and then Udacity 2011, edX 2012, Coursera 2012. They arrived on the scene and started, there's a lot of discussion. And so this present, I am actually, again, looking at three significant things, not timestamped, but a sequence. So first is the era of MOOCs, which grew all the way. And then I look at a bit before COVID, and I use the word from MOOCs to flukes, because too many things happened, too much action, too much of money coming in. And then COVID, unexpected action, which forced everybody to learn. And that created an unbelievable, should we say, acceleration of what was already beginning to happen from 2017 on, when the net was becoming very important for learning. So this period of massive growth continued through till the end of COVID. And so MOOCs to flukes, and then I use the word nukes, because too many unfortunate things happened in the last couple of years. So if I look at the MOOCs period also, and then we do know that valuation became a big game, but 2015, Udacity was valued at 900 million, and last year it was down to 100 million. edX was sold to 2U. 2U bought it for 800 million. And today, 2U itself is valued at half of that amount. And of course, in this rise and build up, Indian companies received, startups and the others received $2.3 billion as funding for growth. Went to 4.2 in the financial year 20, which is before March 20. And in the subsequent year, which is the year of COVID, the first year still went up to 4.7. But then we do know that the 3 quarters of the last year, it went, so 4.7 would mean something like 2.2 per quarter. So last year, first quarter, 1.4 billion, second quarter, 0.6, and third quarter, 0.14 billion. So huge amount of stress, should we say. And not just that, we've seen about we heard about all the news. I don't want to go into that. I think that's not for me to talk about. Everybody here knows it. The layoffs in the sector, shutdowns, and so on. And so this whole period up till now, the second part, which I talked about, the 15 years from MOOCs to flukes and then to nukes, has been, again, a very tumultuous, enjoyable, exciting, but very difficult time towards the end. And huge amount of lessons during this period, huge amount of lessons. And I think with that, now I really want to go to the future, because some of the lessons learned during the recent past are going to be things that I want to talk about. And when I look at 2002 and beyond, I want to label this period as large opportunities, very large opportunities, but you have to tread carefully. Large opportunities, tread carefully. And that's the theme I want to talk of the future that we're getting into. So when we talk of opportunities, and some of these things have been talked of, it's not the first time I'm mentioning, is that there's some numbers which define the potential scope. So global education, $6 trillion a year. World population crossed 8 billion on 15 November last year. India's population is exceeding China's. By some measures, happened already. And total literacy is still very low in India. In fact, from school to college, when we look at that cohort, the gross enrollment ratio in higher ed is only 1 out of 4. And we have to go well beyond 3 out of 4. And alongside this new crop which comes in every year, we know that the working life of people are working quite actively till 70. And in academic circles, is going beyond that as well. So working life is increasing as well. And this is happening in an era where there's massive change around all of us. And therefore, in addition to the new college youngsters coming in looking for jobs, those who are in their jobs are staying longer, and everyone in their job is expected to learn new things on a daily basis. And the technology that can provide all of this, accelerated by AI and ML and data science and simulation and 5G for networks, all of that is in the melting pot. So we can see that there's an enormity of what needs to be done in the space of EdTech. But I also want to talk and reflect back a bit on the risks, because there's talk of saying tread carefully. And treading carefully, I think, is really the conversation I want to spend time on, because that's where I draw upon the lessons. So in treading carefully, I'm using 2 words. One word is quicksand, and the second is going to be minefields. So what's the quicksand? The quicksand, many of you on the line know this, on the show program know this, that sustainability for edtechs, particularly made visible during this funding winter, and is that we are spending much more than we are earning. And that's what I mean by quicksand. You're trying to flap around, but the sand is pulling you down. And we are operating. We've been talking about 6 rupees to be spent to earn 1 rupee, or 2 rupees to be spent to earn 1 rupee. And when the rupees were floating, it was fine. But when you don't have it, you have to spend less than 1 rupee. We are saying you spend 20 paise maybe, or less. So 20% of revenue, but currently we are at a multiple of revenue. And that is the quicksand. It takes you down very quickly, very helplessly. And I think that recognition is there in front of everybody, that this is not a way that this sector can seize this humongous opportunity which is there in front of us. And therefore, sustainability is the key. Absolutely is the key. And sustainability here, I'm referring to financial viability. I'm talking about saying that you have to spend less than you earn. And this is a mentality I think everybody is fully aware of right now, trying to figure out ways and means, and sometimes very drastic means, very painful means, particularly when it comes to dealing with people that you brought in, nurtured, and who have been contributing. Very tough, hard decisions to be taken. And this is a huge, huge question that we need to be single-mindedly focused on, to say, how do we earn more than we spend? How do we spend more than we earn and still grow? And so it's an acid test for a community of startups who were told that grow at any cost. because you'll grow past your problems. You'll fail fast, do many, many things and keep failing because you don't know which of your 20 things will work. So the luxury of doing that is gone, at least for the near future, is gone. And therefore, I just want to emphasize that this quicksand phenomena is catching many of us, and we need to get our way out of this quicksand. And then the minefields. And I want to list a few. Some are the context we are in, and therefore not so easily changeable. Some are expectations from the sector, and therefore the perceptions of society about the sector's behavior and rules and guidelines and what they consider good and bad. And then, of course, about what we should do going forward. And of course, much of the discussion today is going to be around how we go forward, and therefore I'll only touch on the essentials. So first of all, in the minefields, I mean, education, there's a societal mindset. So, and this is global, but predominantly historical, that there are some things which we as citizens of a country expect the state to do, the public goods as we call it. Okay, if you have parks in your colony, they're meant to be public goods. If you have roads, public goods. I mean, you do pay for it through some taxes, but public goods. Healthcare has always been public good, except that when no money available, we then have to, government has to bring out policy to say, how do we get non-government players to come in? And education. Education, perhaps the last area which government wants to yield to non-formal players. But, and we know that the budget, I mean, all of you, many of you I'm sure track the education budget. And for the last 50 years or more, we've been talking about pegging the education as part of GDP at a certain number. The Kothari Commission 1966 said 6% and never went anywhere near that. In fact, till the last budget, not the one which came out this year, we were slipping down from 4 towards 3.5, 3.2, 3.1. And this year's budget, which was announced recently, is 2.9%. So now government obviously has priorities. They give importance to education, but there are many other things which show up. And therefore, even the NEP, which came in 2020, talked about saying that 6% of budget is required to implement the policy. So that money does not exist because the country has priorities, and we accept that. But if that money is not available, then government has no option but to say we bring in the non-formal, non-government players. And if that money comes in with some expectations. But as citizens, and I can say this, I'm sure for all of you, then when your children go to school or your siblings go to school and the fee goes up, we don't like it. We just, it's a revulsion deep down in the system, because, you know, how can you pay? Why doesn't education come for free? So this societal mindset has yet to reconcile with the reality that country after country is recognizing that government alone can't take the burden of education, and that non-government players have to come in. But if non-government players come in, they could be foundations, not enough money. And if it's capital which is coming in, which is seeking a return, then you're half closing your eyes to the fact that, well, this is now for profit, and education by law, at least degree giving or school going education by law, is not for profit. So this has not been reconciled, and therefore, much as we are asked to contribute to the education process, each one of us has a part of us which says, well, you know, why am I paying so much fee? Now, countries like US have experimented. They've permitted for profit in degree giving, and then have had to pull back. At least twice they've had some serious backlash, organizations, because I think this reconciliation is not going to happen so easily, that education is not a public good. And then we want to do equity. So when we talk about digital divide, I gave the example of the government schools. The government funded that. And now increasingly, we have a foundation as well, which works with companies like the Dells and the large corporations to get their CSR to go to children who can't afford to pay. And if you have to do that equity, then how do you make it viable? Is a minefield. And so the government response is, okay, get involved, but you'll have to play by the rules. And therefore, regulation comes in. And regulation is something which I just want to leave as a serious caution for everybody who's on this call, because in the last couple of years, we've seen how there's been an overreach of regulation because there's an expectation that people are not playing by the rules, or people have gone overboard in trying to commercialize things. So regulation is important. I was reading in the newspaper, I think yesterday, even today there's some write-up that government wants to be more mindful of how private players participate. And since much of the work that even the private sector players overlap with formal, this becomes truly a minefield, which we have to look at. And then there's internal regulations. One is external regulation the government does. Internal is all about governance. There, the risks we are seeing in governance, and we've seen some breaches in governance in the last few decades. This is not the time to talk about that, but either missing the complexity of learning. And so, for example, if you look at how revenue is recognized, it's a gray area. It's a slippery slope, as I would call it. And errors can be made in that. So applying commercial principles to education in the eyes of the regulator is a minefield, and we have to be very, very, very careful. And I'll label it and leave it for conversations which may happen later in the day. And then, of course, the great thing is that there are many established players in education using technology or non-formal, and then we have a burst of young, bright minds coming in, whom we term as Edtechs, who are disrupting the model. It's a huge, huge thing, and that also is minefield, because you may think you have a safe business model and someone comes from behind. And this period, the last 4 or 5 years of boom, brought in many young people who may not have been very passionate about education, but very passionate about technology use in education, or very excited by the valuations. So all of that has happened. And these minefields and this quicksand thing, I think, is a caution what I wanted to give. And if you tread carefully, there's a huge amount of opportunity for us. And I want to just close with something that one of my colleagues told me when we were talking about education for profit, making it profitable. He said, it is said about the wine industry. It's called the wisdom of the wine industry, that you have to do 2 miracles. It needs 2 miracles. One is to make good wine. Everybody can produce and get grapes, but to make good wine, out of tens of thousands of people who make it, is a handful which really get to know it, right? So that's the first miracle, which is wine making. And the second is, okay, you make good wine. Now, how do you make money with good wine? So making money with good wine is a second miracle. And that's the wisdom of wine. And I saw this being so relevant to our field of education as well. We need a 2 miracle play. We first have to build learning that delivers outcomes to the learners. Delivers outcome, first requirement. And second is, when it's delivering outcome, is it making money or not? So anyway, the sessions today aim to help us all navigate through these issues. And we've lined up very good speakers, and I'm very grateful to all of them. They're very, very busy people. And I can already see the next 2 speakers. And I've also requested board members of NIIT Limited to anchor those sessions. And so 3 of our board members will be there. And of course, eventually, my co-founder, Vijay Thadani. In summing up, he will also give his words of wisdom, as always. So with that, Neha, I think I'm done for my time. And of course, I'm watching, I'm there. And if you keep posting your questions, they will come back to us at different points in time, and we'll attempt to answer as many as we can. So with that, back to you, Neha.
Thank you, sir, for your enlightening words. Up next is the panel discussion on building a trusted online brand. We have Ms. Shraddha Sharma, founder and chief editor of Your Story, which is one of the most trusted websites on startups and entrepreneurs. She is one of the most well-known faces in the startup media entertainment and an important commentator on the Indian tech universe. Next, we have Mr. Alak Pandey, co-founder of the unicorn Edtech startup PhysicsWala. He is very passionate about education and has built an iconic brand trusted by millions of students across India in just a few years. This session will be moderated by Ms. Avni Davda. She is a strategic advisor at Brain Advisory Network and board member of NIT Limited and Persistent Systems. She was the founding CEO at Starbucks and the youngest CEO in the Tata Group, where she led aggressive expansion of over 85 Starbucks stores in India in 3 years. May I request the audience to type in their questions by clicking on the Q&A icon. They will be answered at the end of this session. Over to you, Ms. Davda, for further deliberations.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be in such a group. Both the co-panelists that we have today. I hope you can hear me clearly. Yeah, thank you. So I was just saying it's a pleasure and an honor. And when Raji, our chairman, said, this is an opportunity to speak to two very amazing founders who've literally written their own stories, and both are very well known. In fact, I told Alak as I met him that he's got a fan in my own family. My husband's also a techie and in the entrepreneurial world and really follows him. His movie has been made, of course, a documentary. And Shraddha, of course, tells, has the power to tell a story in a very compelling way. And I had the opportunity to meet her a few years ago on an IBM panel. So really a privilege and an honor. And we'll try and make this a session. As you both know, both of you have been entrepreneurs. I have not been one. I've been an entrepreneur in a corporate setup, but you know the audience very well. And the context is to really learn from you and learn something very practical. Like Alak and I were saying, I would encourage both of you to speak from the heart, and also let's make it meaningful. I'm sure the audience will have lots of questions. So let's start off with something that I believe is a very rare commodity in entrepreneurship today, but both of you have built such an amazing brand. So I'm going to ask two questions and maybe we'll have Shraddha and then Alak go at it. Building a trusted brand in the online space is like looking for the holy grail, right? किसी को नहीं समझ में आता है कि trust कैसे बनाए. अगर आपका नाम टाटा है, गोदरेज है या NIT है, तो of course आपको लोगों का प्यार और trust बहुत जल्दी मिल जाता है. But as a new company, and given the audience, we are building edtech or technology brands in the online space. What are your two things or one thing that you would like people to understand when they are building trusted brands? So over to you, Shraddha.
Abhi, very honored to be here. Thank you so much. And I don't know if Pawar is there. It's a great honor to be part of this conversation. And I'm looking forward to listening to Alak because it's always interesting and a lot of learning listening to him. So, just to answer your question, how do you build a trusted brand? And I do think about it because they're like, which are the brands that we love? And one of the questions, the answer that comes to my mind is that अच्छे brand overnight नहीं बनते हैं. So one of the things is that, of course, it's a strength and it's also a weakness that you can't overnight build a brand. And I have not seen, like today, if you look at in the startup world, also brands that, one talks about, the Swiggy, Zomato, all these companies, technically these companies have been there for last 10 years. And of course, from a Tata standpoint, which has been a 100-plus-year brand, these are 10-year-old brands, but consistent behavior, which is where you walk the talk, is one of the key recipes where people see you for who you are and see you consistently behaving in a certain way, goes on to build a brand. And then to me, that has been, you look at any of the brands, I think that stands for it. And I would say for your story, we've been there for like 14 years and told 1.5 lakh stories. Just standing with the entrepreneurs when it's easy to critique them, write negative about them and pull them down. Over the years, we've been called, mouthpiece, cheerleader, PR for startups and entrepreneurs, but this is what you stand for. And when you are standing for what you believe in, you will, sometimes it's going to be tough, but being consistent, Saturday, Sunday, day and night, writing stories for 14 years, I think somewhere has made us a brand. And I think it has come with time. So yeah, to sum this up, I'd say consistent takes time. You can't be a brand overnight. Like a brand which people believe in, trust, relate to, comes with time. And same behavior, and for that you might be challenged, you might be questioned, you might be put under the fire, but not changing your behavior when you are tested and being the same, ye sab karke brand ban jate hain. And then it's easy, think about any brand that you like, and I think more or less you'll get these as the answer. So yeah, thanks.
Alak, physics wala, and what is the trust? I think you have a tremendous amount of fan following, but also a lot of trust that students place with you, right? And your brand. So tell us a little bit how you thought of it.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much. And I'm really honored to be the part of this panel. Particularly respected Rajan sir is here. And I've been an ex-NIITian student. Of course, the free session for 7 days. I told Rajan sir on call even. And of course, Shraddha is here. Thank you so much for the precious gift, Shraddha. I received it and you didn't come. So let's leave that. So coming to the brand thing. Yeah. What we say in PW, what I say in PW Physics Wala, that we say that it's not brand, it's emotion. We say it's not brand, it's all about the emotions that play along. If you see in your house, even it's in your home, even you yourself is a brand. For example, Avni, you are a brand in your home that, for example, you go to your job at this particular time, you return from job at this particular time. Yeah, of course, 30 minutes here and there works. But as Shraddha says, being consistent on that pattern is what makes you a brand. That you leave home by 10, you'll reach home by 5, then you will do whatever, cook food or whatever you do for your family, for your children, whatever, for your brother, sister, anyone. Then you watch TV, then you give particular kind of sessions, you do yoga. Then this is your habit. This is the chain of habits that you follow, and everyone is having a habit to see that. So you cannot change it overnight. You cannot change the perception overnight. You have to follow it. You have to be consistent about what it is. It's all about the emotion. One day you cannot say that I'll be Julius Caesar, and the next day you are saying, no, I'm not Julius Caesar, I'm like Premchand. You cannot change it overnight. Your perceptions, your views, you have to stick on it. And in the recent time, I have also seen brand building on the basis of some controversies, on the basis of some viralities. And what do you see? Those brands last, of course, they come overnight and they also last overnight. So brand is something that needs a lot of sweat, a lot of brainstorming, and a lot of consistency along with, and of course, maintaining the same emotions. Moreover, having the transparency with the audience. For example, you have a transparency at your home. If you don't feel like talking with your brother, sister, your mother, parent, you say it in their face. I don't want to talk right now. Let's talk tomorrow. Let's talk some other day. If you don't like a food, you don't overpraise your mother कि बहुत अच्छा बना. अपन मम्मी से अपन खुला बोल देते हैं कि आज नहीं यार नमक नहीं डाला है, कल बहुत सही खाना बनाया था. So you have to be that much transparent and that much raw with the audience. अभी ना वो जमाना चला गया पुराना वाला कि आप ब्रांड को उस तरह से बताओ कि सिर्फ 4 रुपए में ऐसा हो जाएगा. Like you cannot give quotes and all those फ्लैशी लाइंस एंड ब्रांड उससे बन जाएगा कि आप ऐसा कुछ बोल दो. फॉर एग्जांपल अभी भी आप देखते हो टीवी पे वो एड्स आते हैं कि सिर्फ 72 दिन के अंदर आपके सारे सर दर्द को हर लेगा, आपके सारे बदन दर्द को हर लेगा, वजन घटाएं 10 दिन में. सो ऑल दोस इज नॉट गोइंग टू वर्क. यू हैव टू बी रॉ, you have to be consistent, and you have to play along the emotions. Whatever the emotions are there, you have to respect them. And at a lot of time you have to compromise your financials, your business model as well in the name of brand. I am Pratik is my co-founder. Whenever we talk, whenever we have a particular decision to make, so on that particular decision, we sometimes it's like it's a financial decision, it's a business decision, it's a growth decision versus the brand decision. So always the brand decision dominates. What's the brand stand for? The brand stands for students, so the decision should be in the favor of the students only. So that's how the brand is built. A lot of sacrifices has to be made while building a brand. A lot of things you have to sacrifice. You have to sacrifice your family life, you have to sacrifice your personal life, you have to sacrifice sometimes the financial growth of the company, you have to sacrifice a lot of employees' emotions around you, a lot of growth of employees around you. a lot of things you have to sacrifice. So it's like brand first. You have to set 7 ideologies, whatever the brand says, whatever the organization says, that there are 3 golden rules, 7 ideologies that should never be broken, come what may come. So you have to follow them like the freedom fighters followed. So you have to have that emotions for your brand.
Thank you. I think Alak and Shraddha, so consistency, and I can literally, think about the brand that I handle, Starbucks, rituals, like Alak talked about, that you need to have rituals in your brand, and that builds consistency. Whether it's ritual of how you taste coffee or how you get to work or how you tell a story or how you deliver physics on an online session, right? So consistency, very important to stay authentic and true to it, to be able to build it long term. And one of the questions our audience also asked is, and I think Alak, you did speak a little bit about it, how do you manage stakeholders? Because there are going to be pressures on an entrepreneur, pressures that you put, pressure consumers put, pressure investors put, pressure your team builds. So one of the questions is, you have to remain true and authentic. And maybe Alak, one question I wanted to ask you is that a lot of entrepreneurs want to build a community and then monetize it to start off their brand. Your journey was similar. आपने पहले physics के videos free में दिए और YouTube में, और फिर जाके उसको monetize किया, right? So how do you, were there any negative considerations when you switched the model? How did you think about it? Postmortem करना आसान है कि पहले community बनाई और फिर monetize किया, but what was your journey? How did you think about it? क्या trade-offs थे? अगर आप उसके बारे में बताएंगे, that will be very interesting.
See, all this sounds good in an interview, that first you build a community, then you monetize it, then you have like upselling products and all those. But while you are living the journey, you will be on the right track only until you have passion and love for that particular craft that you're following. So if you love your craft, the way will be simple, the way will be a happy way, the way will be a prosperous way. So I enjoyed teaching physics. So that's what I was doing. And I also enjoyed like a sense of making thing engaging, you can say part of dramatics. So I was also enjoying that passion there also. On the point, building a community and then monetizing it, it happens on itself. I didn't do it, so I'll be very frank about it. Maybe some of the young entrepreneurs can learn from this and do it intentionally. But when you then do it intentionally, I think there will be a malice intent while building a community only. So you're not building a community, you're building a customer base. So that is there's a difference between them. So you're like having something in your mind already that I'll use this community for the business model. So that's not going to work. Community is built with love, community is built with trust, community is built with rawness. It's not built with malice intentions of building a unicorn company on it. I'll be very honest. So it all happens by chance for physics wala. Yeah, of course, on that point जो आपने बोला कि कैसे सडनली जब आप चीजों को मोनेटाइज करते हो तो कम्युनिटी का बिहेवियर, सो इट्स वेरी एग्रेसिव. दे आर लाइक कि तुमने मेरा इस्तेमाल किया, तुमने इसीलिए ये सब किया था, एक दिन तुमको यही करना था, यही तुम्हारा एम था. सो इट्स लाइक you love a girl and she is very dear to you, she is very lovely, she is very caring, and you love her like hell. You marry her, then you come to know that her father is a rich businessman. Then she is like, तुमने मेरे पापा के लिए शादी की थी, सारा खेल इसलिए चल रहा था पहले से. You are like, no, I love you. That was I was doing. So that kind of feedback came from student section as well कि आप monetize करना चाह रहे हो, आप पैसे बनाना चाह रहे हो, आप businessman बनना चाह रहे हो, आप rich बनना चाह रहे हो. But at the point when you stick to your vision and you go and talk about it, it's not like that we will not talk. A lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of brand do this mistake of remaining silent. And we have discussed this a lot in our offices that कई बार होता है ना, ऐसे कोई चीज हो जाए तो इसके बारे में कुछ नहीं बात करेंगे, शांत रहेंगे, कुछ नहीं बोलेंगे तो सही रहेगा, बोलने से बात और बढ़ जाएगा. सो होता क्या है, ना बोलने से भी बात उतना ही बढ़ता है और सारा नेगेटिव परसेप्शन में बढ़ता है. आप जाके बात ही नहीं कर रहे हो जिन लोगों के साथ आपने कहानी स्टार्ट की थी, है ना. आप घर पे देखो ना, जैसे कोई चीज होती है तो हम लोग क्या ये बोलते हैं, नहीं इस बारे में पापा से डिस्कस ही नहीं करते हैं यार, पापा बोल रहे हैं अपन दरवाजा बंद कर लेंगे, कभी कुछ होगा ही नहीं. नहीं यार, वो चीज हो रही है, इट्स फॉर रियल हैपनिंग आउट देयर. सो गो एंड टॉक. You have to go and fix it. You have to go and talk about it. At least you cannot fix it, just talk. कई बार ना चीजें फिक्स नहीं होती, कई बार जाके सिर्फ बात कर लेनी होती है. सो
Correct.
आपके पास कम्युनिटी इतनी अच्छी है, तो हम लोग ने जाके, मैंने कई बार जाके बात की, मैंने समझाया, देखो भाई एक अकेला आदमी इतना सब कुछ नहीं कर सकता है। जब तक दाल रोटी नहीं चलेगी, जब तक पैसा नहीं आएगा, और लोगों की जब तक सैलरी नहीं आएगी, तब तक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन नहीं बिल्ड होगा। अकेला इंसान से फिजिक्स पढ़ाएगा, कहाँ से आपको असाइनमेंट बना के देगा, कहाँ से आपको टेस्ट पेपर बना के देगा, कहाँ से आपके टेस्ट पेपर चेक होंगे, कहाँ से आपके डाउट सॉल्व होंगे, ये सारी चीजें पॉसिबल नहीं है। ये करवानी है तो बताओ, नहीं करवानी नहीं बताओ। तो सब एग्री करते हैं। देन ऑफ कोर्स देयर विल बी सम fraction of negativity that will always be there from the community, but you have to take continuous feedback from the community and improve it and keep working on it. And वही है कि आप अपने मेन विजन को हमेशा अपने मेन विजन को हमेशा पॉइंट बना के रखो, उससे आप इधर उधर ना हो, तो चीजें इतनी प्रॉब्लमेटिक नहीं होती हैं। कम्युनिटी को मोनेटाइज करने में आता है थोड़ा सा रैत उस तरफ से, बट यू हैव टू जस्टिफाई इट विथ योर प्रोडक्ट दैट सी दिस इज वर्दी, दिस प्रोडक्ट इज वर्दी। आज बच्चे अगर मिलते हैं, आज बच्चे यूट्यूब पे बात करते हैं, कहीं मुझसे मिलते हैं, तो मुझसे बोलते हैं 3 साल में आपने बदली चीज, आपने चीजों को बदला। पहले आप एक यूट्यूब चैनल थे, आप ऑर्गेनाइजेशन हो, आप एजुकेशन सिस्टम के अंदर आप कुछ कर रहे हो, अब बाकी एडटेक का प्राइस डाउन हो रहा है। तो ये सब तभी हो सकता था जब आप ये करते। हाँ, उस टाइम हम लोगों ने गलत समझा था। सो इट टेक्स टाइम, यू हैव टू होल्ड ऑन टू योर विजन एंड प्रूव देम इन द एंड। दैट्स व्हाट आई फील।
Fantastic, Alak. I think very good insight there that the journey is not easy. I think authenticity, आपकी जो आपकी मेन स्ट्रैटेजी या विजन है उसको ट्रू रहना, आपकी कम्युनिटी से बुरे टाइम में या जब ब्रिक बैक मिलते हैं तभी बात करना बहुत जरूरी होता है। एंड श्रद्धा, आई थिंक आप दोनों ऐसे एंटरप्रेन्योर हो जिन्होंने एक ही चीज को लेके उसमें बहुत डीप डाइव किया और अपना ब्रांड बिल्ड किया, राइट? सो श्रद्धा, यू spoke a little bit about it, that you wanted to do journalism and you wanted to carve a niche for entrepreneur who was growing, that entire field was growing in India, and you said, I will bring out positive story. So my question to you is twofold. One is it challenging to remain true to only one area? And now that you are thinking of expanding your journey and even, you know, starting a Your Story University, how did you make that decision? So how did you grow from one niche, build it, and then think about scaling up? So 2 questions in one, but would love to hear your perspective on this.
Thanks, Avni. Before that, I just want to answer. अलग मैं दिल्ली फ्लाई करके आई थी तुम्हारे शादी के लिए, बट पता नहीं H1 वो जो भी कोई वायरस चल रहा है वो मुझे हो गया, मेरे लाइफ में कभी हुआ नहीं है। आई हैव ऑलवेज स्टेड प्राइड की मेरा इम्यूनिटी बहुत स्ट्रांग है, मैं बहुत तबीयत खराब से गुजरी, और तुम्हारी शादी के लिए ड्रेस भी था, एंड आई स्वेयर, झूठ भी नहीं बोल रही हूँ, लिया कि because I wanted to specially come for your marriage because I relate to you and I have good and strong admiration for you. So sorry, but I want to
Thank you.
your wife. I'm saying through this
Thank
platform. Avni, to answer the question, yes, consistent रहना 14 साल तक, 15 साल शुरू हो रहा है मेरे लिए, is not easy. Sometimes you doubt your own journey, especially when you see everyone around you becoming unicorn. There are so many questions that come. Did I do the right thing? And I was thinking that my biggest theme in life is, you know, the toughest challenge in life is to be positive. मतलब इतना हम बचपन से हमें सिखाया जाता है बी पॉजिटिव, बहुत दुनिया इज नेगेटिव, and that is a fact that things around you will be negative. तब आप कैसे consistent रहे? I'll give you one very small example that 20 years back there was an entrepreneur. अभी वो बहुत बड़े entrepreneur थे. He's still a very big entrepreneur and he was very much in the headlines every day. Suddenly his company and his valuation was coming down and there was a lot of negativity around him. So someone in my team said, hum likhenge Humpty Dumpty and blah 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 or something, or Jack and Jill had a fall, came tumbling down, और uska naam tha came tumbling down. I said, why make fun? And the person said that, listen, this will go viral and we will get a lot of views, and this is something that we should write about. I said, no, if we are saying that we are standing with the entrepreneur when they are tumbling down, then that time we will also not tumble down and go down from what we believe in, and we didn't, right? And then uske chalte aaj today Avni, people say that, oh, one has very fantastic relationships with everyone and all the founders trust. Yesterday I spent 5 hours with Dipinder Goyal, and I'm looking forward to the story, the conversation, because he's talked about his stammering, things he's never spoken in his life, right? And that trust tabhi hota hai when people know that consistently you've stood with them. It comes at a cost. You have to pay the price. and you have to be ready to pay the price. Like, I want to say NIIT, today we are in this conversation, and I really admire Mr. Pawar, because to build NIIT kind of a brand, I wonder what goes in his mind when he saw the Edtech thing happening and everyone becoming unicorn overnight. Because the way he's also built NIIT is based on first principle of sahi dhang se, sahi tarike se brand banana. So yes, and to all the young people and everyone who's building a business, it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. And if anyone says anything, otherwise they're bullshitting. Because to stand to any principle, जैसे अलग कह रहा था ना कि घर में भी अगर किसी भी point of view में खड़ा रहना और consistently आसान नहीं. So that is what I would say. And as I'm expanding today, universities basis that we've done 1.5 lakh stories, 1.5 lakh stories देश में entrepreneurs को और कौन किया होगा? हम किए हैं. बैठ के गोईठे की तरह, एक तपस्या की तरह बनाया है. तो उस 1.5 लाख स्टोरी में वी सेड कि क्या क्या है कि एंटरप्रेन्योर सक्सीड कैसे करते हैं और फेल कैसे करते हैं. और उस बेसिस पे वी सेड लेट्स कम अप विद अ लर्निंग. And I'm very privileged and honored, आज share करना चाहूंगी, that I'm in Delhi right now and we got a pilot project in Bihar to train 4 lakh women कि उनको हम entrepreneur कैसे बनाए. अब हमें लग रहा है ये ट्रेनिंग तो हम बनाए थे न्यू एज लोगों के लिए बेस्ड ऑन 1.5 लाख का जो हमारा 14 साल का डेटा था. So that new young people will have those skill sets. Now we have to train this to 4 lakh women in Bihar to get them to be entrepreneurs. So अलग मैं तुमसे भी बात करूंगी, Mr. Pawar से भी बात करूंगी, but I will take this training that how do we get women to start up in Bihar. I come from Bihar और चीजें बहुत बदली हैं मगर बहुत नहीं भी बदली हैं ईस्टर्न यूपी और बिहार में. So this so one has to figure out, one has to learn. But to sum up, Abni, and I have to just tell you, Starbucks is a brand that we all love and I'm jealous of Starbucks because इतने consistent framework है कि इंडिया में भी आकर becoming such a ubiquitous brand where on the airports you see people are lining up. There is something to learn from there also. So yeah, to everyone I would say it's hard, it's tough to stay true to who you are. दूसरा but if you stay true, consistent, बहुत data मिल जाता है, बहुत context मिल जाता है और वही data, वही context helps you to expand and diversify.
Thank you. I think that's very, very powerful. And I like the emotional connect that both the co-panelists have. I'm sure you'll make up about missing his wedding, but thanks for sharing that. In fact, one of the participants has posed this question. Maybe Alak, you want to take a go at it. कभी-कभी होता है कि passion है, बहुत सारा co-founder या अकेले जो journey पे हम निकलते हैं, we sometimes obsess over our ideas and we fall in love with them, right? But sometimes they don't make sense. So how, in your experience, whether it's your journey or journeys that you've seen, and what would you tell these people? When is the right time to give up? Because अगर आप छोड़ोगे नहीं तो कुछ और नया भी नहीं बनोगे, right? It can't become a rabbit hole कि आप जाते ही जाओ और उसमें से कुछ निकले नहीं. So according to you, what are the 2 things that a person should watch out for when they know their idea is powerful, they believe in it, but there's just no success coming? When do you change? And I'm not just talking about a pivot. I think when do you become a little bit more objective and get out of it and say, I'm going to make a different choice? क्या देखना चाहिए 2 चीजें that tells you कि बहुत हो गया, now you need to think differently?
मतलब आइडिया से ज्यादा तो ये छोड़ने ओढ़ने की बातों से मुझे यही आता है. ये बात आपने सही की, कहीं पहुंचने के लिए कहीं से तो निकलना पड़ेगा भाई. तो एकदम सही बात है. तो बीटेक ही छूटा था मेरा तो तीसरे साल में, तो ग्रेजुएशन ही नहीं हो पाई. तो वो भी एक क्रूशियल डिसीजन है. ठीक है, स्टार्टअप नहीं था, कोई आइडिया भी नहीं था, पर एक ट्रैक था जिसमें मतलब भारत का सबसे ज्यादा नौजवान उसी पे चलता है भाई. बीटेक करने जाता है और एक गरीब वर्ग का बच्चा है, वो बीटेक करने गया है, बैंक से लोन लेके. तो मेरे लिए तो बहुत ही डिफिकल्ट वही एक डिसीजन था कि छोड़ूंगी ना छोड़ू भाई. और तब तो मैंने वो छोड़ दिया था सिर्फ कि 5,000 की नौकरी मिल जाएगी यार तो बैंक का लोन दे देंगे. तो क्या वो डिसीजन क्यों लिया था? तो उस टाइम पे तो मेरा यही था कि मेरे लिए वो लाइफ थ्रेटनिंग जगह हो गई थी, तो मेरा इंटरेस्ट खत्म हो गया था उसके अंदर. और जब मैं बहुत हाइपर एक्टिव आदमी हूँ, मेरा ये है, मेरे कुछ करना है और जो करना है वो बहुत ज्यादा करना है, ये मेरे दोस्त भी बोलते हैं. और ये मेरा एक फियर भी है कि इफ आई फॉल इनटू समथिंग डार्क आई विल गो डार्क लाइक एनीथिंग. सो मेरी प्रॉब्लम यही है कि मैं जो करता हूँ पूरे दिल से करता हूँ, जान से करता हूँ, फिर करता जाता हूँ. जब तक एकदम उसका एकदम पहाड़ नहीं बन जाता है। सो मेरे पास कुछ करने को क्रिएटिव था नहीं वहाँ बीटेक में, मेरे को मजा नहीं आ रहा था, तो फिर मैं गलत आदतों में पड़ गया, तो उसी में पड़ा जा रहा हूँ, चला जा रहा है, नहा नहीं रहे, धो नहीं रहे, एकदम बुरी जिंदगी है। तो मुझे लगा कि कोई भी चीज जब लाइफ थ्रेटनिंग हो तो उसको छोड़ देना चाहिए, पहला तो स्टेप ये है। बट टॉकिंग अबाउट बिजनेस एंड स्टार्टअप एंड आइडियाज प्रोडक्ट्स, वो थोड़ी अलग कहानी है। तो वहाँ क्या इंडिकेटर आपको दिखने लगता है? देखिए आजकल क्या है ना कि बहुत ज्यादा डेटाबेस सारी कहानी होती है, और आपके पास ये सारी एनालिटिक्स होती है, इतने बढ़िया टूल है, इतनी बढ़िया एमआईएस टीम आप बना सकते हो कि आपको अगले 3-4 साल का प्रोजेक्शन दिख जाता है। मोर और लेस 90% केसेस में वो सही भी होता है। अब हम लोग कई कुछ प्रोडक्ट हैं जो नहीं काम करते हैं, जैसे हम लोग ऐसा नहीं कि जो करते हैं सब चल जाता है, ऐसा नहीं है। सो कम्युनिटी इज नॉट लाइक कि तुम जो बना के दोगे वो चल जाएगा, इट्स नॉट गुलाम्स कि आप जो करोगे, इट्स अ कम्युनिटी, सबकी इक्वल राइट है। वो बोलते हैं ये बेवकूफ मत बनाओ, ये चीज नहीं चलेगी। तो एक प्रोडक्ट हम लोग ने बनाया लास्ट ईयर, बड़ा पावरफुल था, और जो आप बोल रहे हो इन्वेस्टर्स को हम लोग ने बताया ये प्रोडक्ट नेक्स्ट ईयर रॉक कर देगा, और ये प्रोडक्ट लाने वाला है इतना बड़ा रेवेन्यू, इतने बड़े इसमें इतने सारे स्टूडेंट्स इसमें एनरोल करेंगे। एंड दैट प्रोडक्ट फेल लाइक एनीथिंग, मतलब एकदम खत्म। और ठीक है, भगवान की कृपा थी, वो नहीं चला, कुछ और चला। तो मुझे लगता है कि कंटिन्यूअसली यू हैव टू कीप वर्किंग ऑन मल्टीपल आइडियाज। अगर आप स्टार्टअप के अंदर हो, प्रोडक्ट्स की बात कर रहा हूँ मैं, एक पर्टिकुलर स्टार्टअप की नहीं, अब स्टार्टअप के अंदर प्रोडक्ट्स की बात कर रहा हूँ, तो आपको मल्टीपल आइडियाज लगातार काम करने होते हैं। एंड नो मैटर कि कोई आइडिया कितना अच्छा लग रहा हो सुनने में, बनाने में, पेपर में उसका डायग्राम बनाने में, असाइन करने में कितना ही सुंदर लग रहा हो, जब तक वो एग्जीक्यूट नहीं हुआ इट्स नथिंग। मतलब आइडिया क्या होता है, 10% होता है, कुछ नहीं होता है। जब तक वो एग्जीक्यूट नहीं हो रहा है, इट्स नॉट वर्किंग, इट्स नॉट वर्किंग, सिंपल सी बात है। तो मेरा एक बहुत, और वो जो आइडिया मैं बता रहा हूँ, प्रोडक्ट बता रहा हूँ, वो मेरा और प्रतीक भाई का बड़ा सोचा हुआ था, बड़ा अच्छा था कि वो तो चलेगा ही चलेगा, हिट हो जाएगा। इट डिडंट वर्क, इट्स नॉट वर्किंग राइट नाउ इवन। पूरी वर्कफोर्स को दूसरी जगह शिफ्ट किया, उसको हम लोगों ने कम किया। हाँ, कहीं ना कहीं उसका कोई यूज हुआ, बट क्या मिलता है उससे? लर्निंग मिलती है बहुत बड़ी। हम लोग को उससे एक कोहर्ट बेस्ड लर्निंग होती है, वो हम लोग को समझ में आई कोहर्ट बेस्ड लर्निंग कैसे होती है। हमारा टेक बहुत इंप्रूव कर गया, वन ऑन वन लर्निंग हमें समझ में आई टेक में कैसे करते हैं। हमें ये समझ में आ गया ऑफलाइन के अंदर कैसे डिजिटल चीजों को डालना है। जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल हम लोग ऑनलाइन एजुकेशन बोला जाता है, एडटेक है वैसे तो ऑफलाइन भी करते हैं, बहुत ज्यादा करते हैं ऑफलाइन, तो इट्स अ वेरी बिग पार्ट ऑफ आवर रेवेन्यू स्टूडेंट बेस आल्सो। सो ऑफलाइन के अंदर कैसे टेक्नोलॉजी को डालना है, वो लर्निंग हम लोग को मिली उस प्रोडक्ट से, जो हमारा प्रोडक्ट फेल हो गया। कैसे पता चलता है कि वो प्रोडक्ट नहीं चल रहा है? इट्स द फीडबैक, इट्स नॉट द रेवेन्यू, it's not the number of students, number of customer enrolling in it, it's the feedback and the amount of usage also. कई बार क्या होता है कि चीज का फीडबैक बहुत अच्छा है बट यूज नहीं हो रहा है, तो फायदा क्या है? कई बार होता है ना, जैसे कोई बहुत महंगी चीज है, या कोई बहुत प्रीमियम चीज है, या कोई ऐसी चीज है जो बहुत ज्यादा यूज नहीं होती हो, हम लोग बोलते हैं अच्छा तो है यार, पर पता नहीं जाएंगे नहीं उस रेस्टोरेंट में, यार ये बढ़िया तो है। अब आप लोग हो, सो ये लिपस्टिक अच्छी तो है यार, पर खरीदूंगी नहीं मैं, इससे अच्छा वाली खरीद लेती हूँ। सो व्हाट्स द यूज ऑफ गोइंग फॉर दैट? तो दो चीजें बहुत ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट होती है, एक फीडबैक और एक उसका यूजेज। आपने जितने लोगों को सोचा था, आपने जितने अमाउंट ऑफ कस्टमर्स बोलते हैं, हम लोग स्टूडेंट्स बोलते हैं, जितने अमाउंट ऑफ स्टूडेंट्स सोचा था टारगेट करेंगे, क्या उस ट्रैक पे ये है, और क्या वो फीडबैक आ रहा है? इट्स नॉट अबाउट रेवेन्यू, रेवेन्यू पार्ट सॉर्ट हो जाता है। ऑफ कोर्स आप अब आप बेसिक प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी का तो हमेशा ध्यान रखें, स्टार्टअप में भाई प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी से ऊपर कुछ चल ही नहीं रहा है, इट्स द की टू एवरीथिंग। तो यूनिट मैट्रिक्स तो आपकी हमेशा सही होनी चाहिए, पर वो थोड़ा बहुत ऊपर नीचे चल सकता है, provided कि it's reaching to the right amount of audience and it's getting the right feedback and they are coming again and again to purchase it. For example, क्या होता है कि शहर में बहुत अच्छा जिम खुला, अब ये एग्जांपल एकदम सही है, तो बहुत अच्छा जिम है, आप बोलते हो कि हाँ यार ये पर्टिकुलर सिल्वर जिम बहुत अच्छा है, इसकी मेंबरशिप ले लो यार, बॉडी बन जाती है। एक बार आप मेंबरशिप ले लेते हो, फिर जाते नहीं हो, फिर जीवन में दूसरी बार लेते भी नहीं हो, कि आपको पता है। सो अच्छा है, बहुत बढ़िया है, बट शायद जिस ऑडियंस के लिए आप बना रहे थे उसके लिए, मान लो आप कोई बहुत बड़ा सिल्वर जिम है, आप उसको खोल दो स्लम्स एरिया में, नहीं जाएगा ना स्लम्स का बंदा, वो कहेगा हाँ यार बहुत अच्छी चीज है, बहुत बढ़िया है, फीडबैक भी अच्छा है। अगर किसी ने किसी तरह से ज्वाइन भी कर लिया एक बंदे ने स्लम के, फीडबैक भी अच्छा है, पर वो आ भी नहीं पाएगा, उसको भाई नौकरी पे जाना है, सुबह कूड़ा धोने जाना है, वो कह रहा है यार वापस जा भी नहीं सकता मैं रोज रोज यहाँ, पर बहुत बढ़िया। तो आपको सही ऑडियंस के ऊपर सही प्रोडक्ट पिच करना चाहिए, राइट अमाउंट ऑफ यूजेज आ रहा हो, राइट अमाउंट ऑफ फीडबैक आ रहा हो, तो आप उसके साथ आगे जाओ। नहीं आ रहा है, सो ऑफ कोर्स यू मस्ट हैव अ फॉल बैक एंड स्विच इट। एंड कई बार बोलते हैं कि छोड़ो नहीं, उस चीज को पकड़े रहो और चलते रहो। नो, दिस नॉट ट्रू, यू हैव टू लेट गो थिंग्स। बट आपका बेसिक प्रिंसिपल जो है, फॉर एग्जाम्पल अब कोई जिम खोल रहा है, मैं उसी एग्जाम्पल पे अटक गया, तो उसका बेसिक प्रिंसिपल था कि वो लोगों की बॉडी बनवानी है, हेल्थ बनवानी है, तो कुछ और कराया, योगा सेशन कराना स्टार्ट कर दे, थोड़ा प्राइस कम कर दे, वट एवर इट इज। सो बेसिक आइडिया आप वही रखो। फॉर एग्जाम्पल हमारा जो प्रोडक्ट थोड़ा सा फेल हुआ, उसका ऑल्टरनेटिव हमने निकाला अपने डाउट इंजन के अंदर, उसकी लेयरिंग 6 लेयर कर दी, 4 लेयर था उसको 6 लेयर बनाया, वहां पे इंप्रूवमेंट की, वहां पे ऑटोमेशन लगाया, अभी ऑन स्क्रीन डाउट लेके आ गए। तो उस वहां से बहुत सी लर्निंग मिली, पर उसको एक डिफरेंट पाथ पे हम लोग ने स्विच कर दिया।
Thank you, Alak. I think that was very meaningful. A question to both of you on brand building. जब आप स्टार्टअप शुरू करते हैं ना, तो कई लोग बोलते हैं कि पहले आप अपना वायबल प्रोडक्ट एस्टैब्लिश करो, उसके बाद ब्रांड बिल्ड करना. कई लोग बोलते हैं पहले से ही ब्रांड बिल्ड करो, क्योंकि अभी तो बहुत लोगों को फंडिंग भी मिल जाती है. तो एक्चुअली मेरा क्वेश्चन है कि आपका व्यू क्या है इसमें ऑन ब्रांड बिल्डिंग, और ऐसी 2 मिस्टेक्स क्या है जो एंटरप्रेन्योर्स को अवॉइड करनी चाहिए अर्ली स्टेजेस में ऑन ब्रांड बिल्डिंग स्पेसिफिकली.
श्रद्धा, आप आंसर करें. आप बहुत सारे एंटरप्रेन्योर से इंटरेक्ट करते हैं, आपके पास बहुत अच्छा आइडिया होगा, इस क्वेश्चन का सही आंसर आपके पास होगा.
Yeah, what are the mistakes, Shraddha, that one can avoid in the early stages when it comes to brand investment? And do you believe that people should invest early on, or should they first, establish their product? There are 2 schools of thought. So which one would you think is, viable, especially for the edtech sector?
Now that you've added for especially for the edtech sector, I would say एक गाना था ना, ये पब्लिक है सब जानती है. Right now there is such high level of awareness, I can't even tell you that there is such level of scrutiny, and I think unfair, because for me there is a physics wala which is very different, but there is a lot of scrutiny, unfortunately. In fact, I don't want to say, I was in a very big important meeting with a lot of government officials, and there was the way they joked about one of the edtech brands, which is one of the most iconic edtech brands in the country, with lot of star power and everything. But I think for all of us to see, the answer lies here, which I believe that you can't buy a brand. You can't buy through money. Money can't build a brand. And I think today EdTech world has established that for us as a case study, as clarity, कि आप बड़े-बड़े film stars को लाकर भी brand नहीं बना सकते if you don't deliver on promise. Especially EdTech to me feels, and now that you've asked about EdTech in particular, feels to me as there is so much of emotion attached to it. There is so much of aspiration attached to it. There's so much of hope attached to it. We just have to go back and look at our own families and upbringing. Parents give, I was interviewing this Honorable Minister Rajiv Chandrasekhar, and he had tears in his eyes because he was saying that for his studies, his father's lifelong saving or whatever was 8 lakh rupees. Wo sara apna paisa. And that's for the minister, that's for anyone, all of us will relate to that. So there is so much of emotion attached to edtech sector that if people feel that you are trying to fleece them or make money out of them, because there is this other school of thought where Nandan Nilekani has created, he believes that edtech should not be monetized, edtech should be in a certain way. So sab tarah ke thoughts hain. Us hisab se I would say to entrepreneurs is that we've seen, nobody should feel bad that I don't have so much of capital to build a brand, because a brand in edtech or any sector for that matter is built by consistent performance. And I know it sounds very, very boring, because if you say to someone that, brushing your teeth is the best thing, nobody wants to do it. Or before pandemic, if you told people buying health insurance is important, none of us do it. So as basic and as boring is performing and getting up and doing the same thing, and not, people should not feel कि आप उनका काट रहे हैं या आप उनसे पैसे बना रहे हैं. We are a very middle class country, all said and done. We don't want that. I studied in Stephens and my education was slightly more than all the other Delhi University college. And I remember my father asking कि ये क्यों, तुम्हारा ही क्यों है, क्योंकि बाकी कॉलेज में तो 200 रुपए हैं, तुम्हारे में 1000 रुपए क्यों है. So that is where I would say, and to me, brand building, I'm very clear, doesn't happen by money, by having film stars. Wo era chala gaya. You need creators. Alak to me is a brand. He built the brand. He was the brand, and on which the business got built. Today, to some extent, I would say for my business also, right? Like there is authenticity attached to Shraddha. And then people know कि अच्छा भी अब expand कर रहे हैं, 200 लोग का team है, तो शायद ये सारे लोग उस तरह से code of conduct behave करेंगे, शायद हम entrepreneur first रहेंगे. And that to me is how the brands are built. And of course, Avni, you should also talk about it, because you work in and you're part of a brand which is very, very consistent in the way they conduct themselves.
I think that's a great segue that Alak, you are, like she said, physics wala, you built that niche and your authenticity comes from who you are. So any thoughts on mistakes? Because, looking at people who've built it, I think a lot of people who are starting their journey, unke liye choice karna difficult hota hai. So any mistakes in brand building early on that you avoided or that you think other people should avoid, Alak?
नहीं, श्रद्धा जी ने बहुत अच्छी लाइन बोली। श्रद्धा मैम बोलता हूँ मैं जनरली। श्रद्धा मैम ने बहुत सही लाइन एक बोली कि पैसे से नहीं बनने वाला ब्रांड। और इसके बारे में एकदम यही एक लाइन संदीप जी करके हैं, संदीप सिंगल वीसी हैं, तो वो भी एक लाइन बड़ी सही बोले थे एक दिन की बात हो रही थी स्टार्टअप पे, फंडिंग पे, तो बड़ा क्लियर उन्होंने थॉट दिया कि मनी डजंट सॉल्व प्रॉब्लम, इट ओनली हाइड्स प्रॉब्लम। सो फॉर द टाइम बीइंग वो प्रॉब्लम छुप तो जाती है पर वो खत्म नहीं होती। मतलब आप पैसे से एक बड़ा स्टार लेके आ जाओगे, आपके ब्रांड के बारे में अच्छा बोल देगा, पर यार जो उस ब्रांड ने तेल बनाया है उससे बाल झड़ रहे हैं लोगों के, इट्स नॉट वर्किंग। सो अल्टीमेटली वो कहानी सॉल्व नहीं हुई है। तो इट्स बेटर कि आप जाओ और सर्च करो कि यार तेल के अंदर क्या पिगमेंट रह गया था, उसको सही कर लेते हैं, इंस्टेड कि आप किसी स्टार के ऊपर 5 करोड़ रुपए जला रहे हो। सो पुटिंग लॉट ऑफ मनी इनिशियली फॉर मार्केटिंग, फॉर बिल्डिंग ब्रांड विल नॉट वर्क। तो ये चीज मैंने अवॉइड की स्टार्टिंग से, अच्छी वर्क की। एक दो बार गलतियां भी की हम लोग ने, गलतियां करते ही हैं क्योंकि डिफरेंट स्कूल ऑफ थॉट से लोग आते हैं, जैसे ऑर्गेनाइजेशन बड़ा होता है एंड यू हैव टू रिस्पेक्ट देम एज वेल। तो मैं ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में मतलब मेरे अराउंड जितने भी लीडर्स होंगे सब कहीं ना कहीं बहुत अच्छे पढ़े लिखे और समझदार लोग हैं, अच्छे अच्छे लोग को हायर किया। तो कई बार वो अच्छे खुरापाती आइडिया लेके आते हैं और एक दो बार मैं फंस गया ऐसे आइडिया में। तो और वो एकदम विजन से अलग आइडिया था कि ब्रांड बिल्डिंग में पैसा बर्न करते हैं, एंड वी बर्न लाइक व्हाट 4 CR ऑन ब्रांड बिल्डिंग। ये इसी साल हुआ था एंड दैट वाज अ ग्रॉस मिस्टेक। 4 CR वैसे तो बहुत बड़ी चीज नहीं है, पर फॉर पीडब्ल्यू इट्स अ वेरी बिग थिंग कि हम लोग कभी ब्रांड बिल्डिंग पैसा नहीं खर्च करते थे और कुछ नहीं हुआ, कोई फायदा नहीं हुआ। और हम लोग को पता चला था कि इस दिन सर्वर लेके तैयार रहना, ऐप के डाउनलोड ऐसे आने वाले, ये हो जाएगा, आंधी आएगी, कुछ नहीं हुआ। सो इट फेल फ्लैट। सो स्टिक टू योर आइडियोलॉजी। मेरे एक टीचर थे, उन्होंने कहा था कि देखो जहां तक पहुंचे हो अपनी मेहनत से ही पहुंचे हो, चाहे गधा दिमाग हो चाहे घोड़ा दिमाग हो, तो आगे भी यही गधा या घोड़ा जो भी दिमाग है इसी से चलना, ज्यादा राय मत लेना लोगों की। तो कई बार ना इंडस्ट्री के अंदर बहुत से लोग होते हैं जो बड़े बड़े बिजनेस स्कूल से पढ़ के आते हैं, जो बाहर से कोर्स करके आते हैं, मैकेंजी में जॉब करके आते हैं, वो जिंग जैंग आइडिया देते हैं आपको कि ऐसा करने से ये हो जाएगा, और मैनिपुलेटेड डेटाज आपको बताते हैं, ऐसी चीजें करते हैं। कई बार बाहर से भी लोग ऐसे इनपुट्स देते हैं टू वेस्ट योर मनी। सो डोंट फॉल फॉर दैट। अपने बेसिक इंस्टिंक्ट्स पे रुको, क्योंकि नो वन नोज योर ऑडियंस बेटर देन यू। सो स्टे ट्रू टू योर थिंग्स। कई बार ऐसा हुआ है मैंने अपने लीडर्स को डिसीजन लेने दिया है, जो कि अच्छे होता है मोस्ट ऑफ द केसेस में, पर कई बार ऐसा हुआ है मैंने अपने इंस्टिंक्ट के अगेन उनको डिसीजन लेने दिया। ये बीच में चला करीब 6-7 महीने, एंड इन 90% ऑफ द केसेस आई डोंट नो इफ दे वर रॉन्ग और राइट, रिजल्ट्स नहीं थे। तो प्रतीक भाई अब मेरे से यही बोलते हैं, सर इसमें आपका गट फीलिंग क्या कह रहा है, आप बताओ गट फीलिंग, यू नो द ऑडियंस बेटर, आपका गट फीलिंग ये कह रहा है तो अपन ये करते हैं। अब इसमें ज्यादा लोग की राय नहीं लेते। तो मुझे लगता है कि टेकिंग टू मेनी ओपिनियंस इज ऑल्सो हार्मफुल।
Correct.
इट्स रियली हार्मफुल। सो गो विथ योर गट फीलिंग, गो विथ। मैं एक चीज और बोलूंगा कि बोला जाता है कि डेटा के डिसीजन लिया जाता है और बहुत सारा डेटा देखा जाता है, एनालाइज किया जाता है। मोस्ट ऑफ द डिसीजंस आर बेस्ड ऑन इमोशंस एंड गट्स। रूम के अंदर बैठ के इमोशंस और गट्स पे इंसान डिसीजन लेता है, फिर पूरी कड़ी मेहनत करता है उसको सही प्रूफ करने के लिए और लग जाता है जी जान से। तो ये एक हम लोग चीज करते हैं। बाकी श्रद्धा जी की एकदम एग्री करता हूँ मैं, मनी कैन नॉट बिल्ड अ ब्रांड। श्रद्धा जी की आप ब्रांड देखो ना, इट्स सो रॉ, सो नेचुरल। एंड श्रद्धा जी इट्स नॉट अबाउट यूनिकॉर्न। यूनिकॉर्न तो बनते रहते हैं भारत में, योर स्टोरी एक ही है इतनी स्टोरीज कवर करने वाला। सो दैट और आप जैसे यूनिकॉर्न ही हो गया फॉर एग्जांपल, इट्स जस्ट अ टर्म, डोंट फॉल फॉर दिस टर्म यूनिकॉर्न, वैल्यूएशन एंड ऑल दोस थिंग्स। बेसिक चीज क्लियर है कि नहीं, रेवेन्यू आ रहा है कि नहीं, प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी आ रहा है कि नहीं, आपका कस्टमर रिटेन्ड है कि नहीं, कस्टमर फीडबैक अच्छा है कि नहीं, ब्रांड के बारे में लोग अच्छा बोल रहे हैं कि नहीं, ब्रांड का सर्च बढ़ रहा है कि नहीं। ये बेसिक चीजों पे आप वर्क करो, बाकी चीजें तो यार आती जाती रहेगी, ऊपर नीचे होती रहेगी। सो दैट्स ऑल आई बिलीव।
Like, I think it's true for all of us as we have to stop celebrating unicorn. मैं सोचती हूँ कि impact con, love con, baby con, pop con. There should be many more words than just unicorn in a country. And मैं कहती हूँ मैं love con हूँ. I think it went very popular, it went viral. कि the impact con के भी word होने चाहिए. And I think people are talking. मैं तो हर corridor में कह रही हूँ कि there has to be more word. Unicorn भी हमें US से मिला. ये terminology, so there has to be more. But you know, Avni, if I can say something on what Alak was saying, मेरे पास एक बहुत practical अभी मेरे life में गुजरा example है. We are doing an event in Bombay Tech Parks. हम बैंगलोर में 14 साल से कर रहे हैं. पहली बार हमें महाराष्ट्र गवर्नमेंट ओनली कॉल्ड अस टू डू द इवेंट, और टीम्स है 20 यूनिकॉर्न का एक association है बॉम्बे में, so they said, oh, we want to do it in Bombay. So in 2 months we have to do something for which we work through the year. बैंगलोर में अलग भी आया है, काफी वायरल होता है ये हर समय जब बात करता है, and it's so, but for us it's tough. मैं सोची बॉम्बे में कर रहे हैं, we need to get film stars, right? And I was getting, and the more you talk to film stars, the more money everyone is asking, and I'm thinking, I don't have money. How do I get film stars? Because it's Bollywood, it's Bombay and everything. I can get, of course, we're getting the deputy. You know, a lot of people and entrepreneurs are coming. You know, someone reminded me that, Shraddha, are you being authentic? Like, and that was a very good question. Said, just because you're going to Bombay, you want Bollywood. Now you will go to Delhi and you'll want something else. Who are you? What do you stand for? Who are this audience? जो 1000 लोग आ रहे हैं, वो entrepreneurs हैं. वो क्या चाहेंगे? वो entrepreneurs चाहेंगे. मतलब, so why are you getting this and demotivated? मुझे लगा, getting back to focus, we all, after so many years, sometimes we do get distracted. We do get carried away. ऐसा होता है. And I did get carried. मुझे लगा शाहरुख खान कैसे आ जाए? पठान movie success हुआ. I talked to Ajay Bijli. How can you get me Shahrukh Khan, Amir Khan? Or Sachin Tendulkar, I asked Harjan of Dream 11. So, you know, but now as soon as I stopped focusing on this and saying that entrepreneurs have the best lineup of the entrepreneurs from across the country, and most importantly, I have film stars. So the film stars reached out and they said, क्योंकि मैंने फोकस किया एंटरप्रेन्योर्स मेरे कोर पे, तो फिल्म स्टार्स आए और बोले हम भी इन्वेस्टर हैं, हमें भी इसका पार्ट होना है. सो दिस इज व्हाट आई वांटेड टू से कि फोकस होना और नॉट कैरीड अवे होना is very, very important for the brand. Yeah.
That's a very wonderful story you shared, and I think very practical. One other question is, you know, in education, right, or in media, I think in education, I think Shraddha mentioned, right, that हमारी middle class mentality है, right? Parents अपने पूरे savings लगा देते. It's an emotional decision. So when a new brand is getting built, right, what is most relevant is आपका track record भी नहीं होता है, आपके पास outcomes नहीं होते हैं, right? तो वो बहुत challenging होता है. फिर आपके पास पैसे भी नहीं है, तो आप trust कैसे build करोगे अलग? I think one or two things that entrepreneurs would benefit from your experiences कि education में मेरी ये placement हो गई, मेरे students, right? The student in some sense is a product, और वो outcome आने में 2-3 साल लगते हैं unless it is test prep or something. So initially आप trust कैसे build करोगे अगर आपका track record नहीं है और पैसे भी नहीं है? Anything that stands out for you or any practical suggestion for these guys who are working through their startups?
You know, before Alak answers, I'll answer for Alak a bit on us as an outsider, because I've gone to his office, spent time and spent few hours. I've interacted a lot with him and his team. You know, what surprises me, Avni, is, and I have, because I've had the vantage point of interacting and spending time with a lot of Edtech founders and over the years. So what got me, मुझे जो लगा, 2 चीजें जो मैं बोलूंगी, is कि इसके ऑफिस में ना मुझे बहुत मेरे जैसे बिहारी यूपी very down market, if I may say so, from a startup terminology, लोग दिखे. मुझे लगा अरे आ गई मैं बिहार में या यूपी में या पता नहीं कहाँ आ गई, और मैं सोचा ये स्टार्टअप वाले हैं. मतलब because you know the definition of funded startups is, with all great respect, cool, very urbane, very you know, coming
typical Silicon Valley
with lot of amazing food and infrastructure. मुझे लगा ये कहाँ गए सब्जी मंडी में. So and it felt very familiar. So to me that familiarity
is very important.
That's something he can answer. वो जो familiarity है, जो अपनापन है कि ये मेरा काट नहीं रहा है, ये हमारे जैसे हैं. And I think a lot of that comes from him himself, though he will disagree and say it's physics wala, it's the brand, which he has manifested, that ethos. वो of course he should answer. वो मुझे लगता है is a very big thing for physics wala to be standing you know, very distinctly from all the edtech players. क्योंकि वो आसान नहीं है, because as a founder you can bullshit and get away with it, but it's the story, जो हर चीज आपके ऑफिस में, आपके टीम में, आपके लोगों में वो दिखना, then that means there is something. And I think, as I said, public है, जानती है, and I think somewhere not, he has not bullshitted his way to where he is. He has struggled his way, and that people can see in some way. And that has helped Physics Wala, I feel, to become a brand it is.
Yeah, Alak?
या थैंक यू श्रद्धा। अच्छा हुआ आपने थर्ड पर्सन व्यू ले लिया ना, तो ज्यादा बेटर है, वो ज्यादा समझ में भी आता है, क्योंकि मेरे लिए खुद डिफिकल्ट हो रहा था समझना मैं कैसे बताऊं बच्चे क्यों आ रहे हैं। श्रद्धा ने बाहर से देख के ज्यादा अच्छा, शायद मेरे ख्याल से श्रद्धा जी ने रिलेट कर लिया। ये वही बात हो गई ना कि नौकरी करने के लिए एक्सपीरियंस चाहिए और एक्सपीरियंस के लिए नौकरी चाहिए। तो ये उसी लूप में फंसने वाला है कि बच्चों को प्रूफ करने के लिए रिजल्ट दिखाओ और रिजल्ट के लिए फिर बच्चे चाहिए। अच्छा, पहली बात तो रिजल्ट पे बहुत फ्रैंकली बात करते हैं, अगर एडटेक फाउंडर्स हैं यहाँ पे अपकमिंग, तो यार अभी तो रिजल्ट्स बहुत फैब्रिकेटेड हो गए हैं, इतने फैब्रिकेटेड हो गए हैं कि इट्स ऑफ नो यूज। मतलब कहा जाता है कि ऑल इंडिया रैंक 1 जहां से आएगी उस इंस्टीट्यूट में नेक्स्ट एडमिशन डबल हो जाते हैं, ऑल इंडिया रैंक 10 कहाँ से आएगी। ये ऑल इंडिया रैंक 1 तो घर पे पढ़ने वाला बच्चा होता है जिसको मल्टीपल इंस्टीट्यूट क्लेम करते हैं। आप देखो ना, 7-7 इंस्टीट्यूट में ऑल इंडिया रैंक 1 की फोटो आती है, ऑल इंडिया रैंक 10 5-5 इंस्टीट्यूट से फोटो छपवाता है। हमारे में भी छप रहा होगा, मैं ये नहीं कह रहा नहीं छपा हो, क्या पता किसी ऑनलाइन बैच के अंदर इनरोल हो तो जरूर छापेंगे, हम भी छापेंगे। तो ये रैंक वाला जो मसला है ये बहुत ज्यादा मुझे एक्साइट नहीं करता। मुझे एक्साइट करता है वॉट एवर लेवल्स अ स्टूडेंट एंटर्स इनटू योर कोर्स, आप वहां से उसका बेटरमेंट कर पाए कि नहीं कर पाए, उसका बेसिक आईक्यू लेवल बढ़ा कि नहीं, उसकी प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग कैपेसिटी बढ़ी कि नहीं बढ़ी, और उसको खुद के अंदर चेंज महसूस हुआ कि नहीं हुआ। सी वी टीच लाइक लैक्स एंड लैक्स ऑफ किड्स, और कुछ भी कर लो, भारत में सीट्स तो उतनी कम है, सब सेलेक्ट नहीं होंगे। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, जितने स्टूडेंट हम लोग मेडिकल के पढ़ाते हैं, अगर उसके अंदर ही भारत का नीट का एग्जाम करा ले तो भी सिर्फ 10% बच्चा ही सेलेक्ट होगा, हमारे सारे बच्चों को ले ले तो हमारे ही सारे बच्चे सेलेक्ट होने वाले नहीं है। पहली बात तो यही होगी। So it's not about rank, it's neither about selection, it's about improving the quality of education, improving their IQ level, कि वो जिस लेवल बच्चा, फॉर एग्जाम्पल हमारे यहाँ बच्चा, जैसे अब मैं आपको क्या बताऊं, दिल्ली किसी मॉल में जाता हूँ तो मुझे कम लोग पहचानते हैं, और इलाहाबाद की सड़क पे उतर जाओ तो लोग ज्यादा पहचानते हैं। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, मैं किसी दिन ताज होटल के अंदर रुक गया तो मुझे कम लोग पहचानेंगे, मैं किसी ओयो रूम के अंदर घुसता हूँ तो मुझे सब पहचानने लगते हैं। सो वी कम फ्रॉम दैट पर्टिकुलर एरिया, टियर 3 टियर 2 वाले पेरेंट्स, वो बच्चे वो हम लोग को जानते हैं। अब ये वो बच्चे होते हैं कि फॉरगेट अबाउट ऑल इंडिया रैंक 1, क्योंकि उनका पूरा बेसिक खराब है ना, 6 7 8 कुछ पढ़ा ही नहीं उन्होंने, उनका तो एकदम वो सरकारी स्कूल में पढ़ रहे हैं या ठीक है टियर 3 स्कूल में पढ़ रहे हैं। वो AIR 10 AIR 100 वाला बच्चा जो होता है वो अलग गेम खेल रहा होता है, वो मतलब बहुत ही ट्यूशंस भी जा रहा है, हर सब्जेक्ट के अलग ट्यूशंस होते हैं, पेरेंट्स बहुत डेडिकेटेड होते हैं। और ऐसे केसेस जब भी आप देखो, जो रैंकर्स बच्चे होते हैं, टॉप रैंकर्स, एकदम टॉप रैंकर्स की बात करो, इन बच्चे के पेरेंट्स बहुत अवेयर होते हैं, बहुत एजुकेटेड होते हैं मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम्स, और बहुत बुली भी होते हैं बच्चों के ऊपर पढ़ाने को लेके, एंड वो होना पड़ता है, ठीक है, दैट्स देयर पेन, दैट्स पार्ट ऑफ द गेम। हमारे लिए क्या इंपॉर्टेंट होता है, हमारे लिए इंपॉर्टेंट होता है कि सहारनपुर जैसे जगह से या कश्मीर जैसी जगह से, या कानपुर के पास कन्नौज जैसी जगह, ऐसी जगहों से जब रिजल्ट आ जाता है, उरई से, वहां से मान लो एक ऐसा बच्चा जो मास्क बेच रहा था कोविड के अंदर, उसकी IIT में 4000 रैंक आती है, तो हमारे लिए वो होता है ऑल इंडिया रैंक 1। हम कहते हैं ये हमने करके दिखाया, वो हमें इंस्पायर करता है, वो हमारी सारी कंपनी को इंस्पायर करता है। उसके वीडियोस चला लेते हैं, फिर सबके अप्रेजल हम लोग कह देते हैं नहीं मिलेंगे, सब कहते हैं हाँ कोई बात नहीं चलेगा। सो दैट वर्क्स फॉर अस एज वेल। ऐसी 10 स्टोरी हमारे ऑफिस में चलती है सब कि अभी रिसेंटली विश्वास दिवस करके हम लोग का एनुअल इवेंट होता है, उसके अंदर हमारी टीम ने, हमारे एक बड़े पुराने एजुकेटर, उन्होंने 2 बच्चों को बुलाया था, वो मेरे को भी नहीं बताया था, तो उनकी स्टोरी स्क्रीन पे चलाई। तो उसमें एक बच्ची थी, उसके पापा तो बस ड्राइवर है, और वो गवर्नमेंट मेडिकल कॉलेज में है, इस टाइम में डॉक्टर बन रही है वो लड़की। अपने पहले पूरे, मतलब पापा बस ड्राइवर है, 4 बच्चे, दिन का 300 रुपए कमाते हैं। उसने मुझे राखी बांध दी अभी रिसेंटली। वो आई, उसने, कि उसका एक भाई था, उसने मजाक उड़ा दिया था, उसका एक भाई था, कजन था, जो बड़े रिच फैमिली से थे, तो उन्होंने कहा था तू कैसे डॉक्टर बन पाएगी, तो उसको बड़ा हर्ट हुआ था कि मेरा कोई भाई नहीं है। फिर उसने मेरी वीडियो देखी, वो सेलेक्ट हुई, फिर अभी आके राखी बांधी उसने दिल्ली में मुझको। और एक बच्चा ऐसी कानपुर का है, उसके फादर थोड़े से हैंडीकैप्ड हैं, तो वो भी IIT कानपुर में सेलेक्ट हुआ। तो ऐसे रिजल्ट जब निकलते हैं ना, दिस इज चेंज, दिस इज रेवोल्यूशन, हम लोग को फील होता है। और वो वीडियो वहां चला, PW की पूरी जनता बैठी थी, सबकी आंख में एकदम आंसू भर के, सबके हाँ यार हम लोग कुछ कर रहे हैं। फिर हम लोग ने नेक्स्ट डे सबको मेल किया, अब अप्रेजल नहीं मिलेगा, खुश हो सब बोले हाँ। So that matters for us more rather than getting the top results, getting the top ranks, और उस होर्ड में पढ़ना कि सबसे बड़ी होर्डिंग हम लगाएंगे AIR 1 AIR 100 की, और ऐसा करेंगे। क्योंकि बेसिकली आप देखो, ठीक है आप 100 बच्चा पढ़ाओगे, रिजल्ट तो लास्ट में 10 का ही आएगा जो टॉप रिजल्ट में जाएगा, पर बच्चा वो 90 बच्चा भी ये बोले कि यार जान लगाई थी टीचरों ने, जान लगाई थी टीम ने पूरी, हमने भी बहुत जान लगाई, और उस सफर में बहुत मजा आया, उस जर्नी में बहुत मजा आया। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, मैं किसी कॉम्पिटिशन में जाऊँ, पार्टिसिपेट करूँ, आई एम वेरी 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 डिस्ग्रेसफुल, वेरी बैड डांसर, मैं किसी डांस कॉम्पिटिशन में जाऊँ, मुझे पता है मैं नहीं जीत सकता सकता है, मैं कुछ भी करूँ। पर वहां से अगर वापस लौटने के बाद मेरे को कुछ स्टेप्स आ जाएं, कुछ गाने आ जाएं, मैं लाइफ में आगे थोड़ा बहुत किसी भी फंक्शन में डांस कर सकूं, तो आई फील कि हाँ यार कुछ सीख लिया मैंने, मेरे कुछ आ गया, मैं जहां था उस कूड़े से काफी ऊपर आ गया। तो वो फीलिंग बच्चे को देना, उसको एक होप देना, उसको एक नई लाइफ दिखाना। मतलब हमारे बच्चे तो ऐसे टीयर 3 जगह से आते हैं जो ये दुनिया देखते हैं, क्लासेस में हमारी हम लोग की बातें ही सुन लेते हैं, लाइफ के बारे में हम लोग बातें कर रहे हैं, वर्ल्ड के बारे में हम लोग, ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के बारे में, जॉब के बारे में, वो बातें उनको देना, वो ज्ञान उनको देना, उनको वो एक्सपोजर देना, वही इनफ होता है कंपेयर टू दी रैंक्स एंड ऑल दैट। तो अभी तो उस पर ही हम लोग काम कर रहे हैं, ऐसा फील हो रहा है। विद टाइम ऑफ कोर्स रिजल्ट्स भी आएंगे, बट ऑफ कोर्स आई विल से इट ओपनली एज अ फाउंडर ऑफ एडटेक आल्सो, आई विल से दैट रिजल्ट्स आर टू मच फैब्रिकेटेड दीस डेज। मतलब ट्रस्ट करना ही बहुत मुश्किल है। फॉर एग्जाम्पल हमारा अभी बच्चा था 100% आए जेई में, और वो खुद बैच में इनरोल्ड थे, उन्होंने खुद हमारे बैच में इनरोलमेंट भी था, उनका नंबर भी चेक किया हम लोग ने, इनरोल्ड थे सिंस लास्ट ईयर, 1 साल पूरा पढ़े थे। और उन्होंने मतलब काफी बच्चे थे, 2 बच्चे ऐसे थे, सब ने रिपोर्ट भी किया था कि हमारे 100% आए हैं, उसमें 2 बच्चे ऐसे थे जो बाद में फिर बोले कि नहीं हम अपना रिजल्ट नहीं सबमिट करना चाहते। तो हमारी टीम ने कहा आपका डेटा हमारे पास है, तो बोले नहीं। फिर हमारी टीम के पास सबसे बड़ा एक ट्रम्प कार्ड होता है जो श्रद्धा को भी पता है, कि आपकी अलग सर से बात करवा देंगे हम लोग, अब तो तैयार हो जाओ। और उन्होंने वो ट्रम्प कार्ड भी रिजेक्ट कर दिया, उन्होंने कहा अलग सर से मैं नहीं, पापा बात करेंगे। एंड व्हेन द फादर टॉक्स, देन द फादर टॉक्स अबाउट लिटरली मनी, फिर स्टार्ट होता है पूरा गेम। क्या चाहिए आपको, फोटो छापनी है तो इतना रुपया लगेगा, लाख रुपया लगेगा। अच्छा आपको फोटो के साथ ऑडियो भी चाहिए, 4 लाख रुपया लगेगा। अच्छा आपको रिजल्ट वाले दिन बच्चा अपने साथ चाहिए डांस करता हुआ, इसका 20 लाख लगेगा। अच्छा आपको एक्सक्लूसिविटी भी चाहिए, ये सारे टर्म्स आते हैं पेरेंट्स को आजकल, एक्सक्लूसिविटी चाहिए, कहीं और नहीं जाना है, तो भाई इतना पैसा लगेगा। और अभी तो इस बार तो जेई एग्जाम के पहले टॉप 10 रैंकर्स की पूरी लिस्ट, टॉप 10 या टॉप 100 ऐसी थी, मतलब कुछ पर्टिकुलर रैंकर्स की पूरी लिस्ट चल रही थी, मेरे पास भी पीडीएफ आया था, और वर्सेस रेट लिखा हुआ था, इतने में ये, इतने में ये, इतने में, इतने में, क्लियर ओपन। और वो पीडीएफ टहल रहा है पूरे एडटेक में, किसको खरीदना हो खरीद लो। शाम को मैं देख रहा था किसने किसने लिया है, सेम रिजल्ट्स, वी डिडंट बाय इट, बच गए, क्योंकि पीडीएफ काफी वायरल हो गया था।
This is
तो ये
fantastic,
कोई
Alak.
चीज नहीं है, जो बच्चा आपके पास है उसको इम्प्रूव कराना चाहिए।
This is fantastic, Shraddha, Alak. I think
Thank
the
you.
session for me was really brilliant, knowing each of you and sensing the emotional connect. I think if I had to summarize the key takeaways, as Shraddha said, if you look up the meaning of unicorn, जो बहुत एक mythical character है, जो एक दो में होना चाहिए, difficult to achieve. So I think the simple message that Alak and Shraddha are saying, be a true unicorn, struggle, make a sustainable business, built around trust, around the knowing your consumer, finding your niche. Don't worry about money to solve problems. Be true to who you are and don't get carried away. Be authentic. And most importantly, unicorn तभी बनेगा जब आपका धंधा और आपका 40-50 years का legacy होगा. I mean, I'm proud to say I'm serving on the board of NIT, जो overnight flamboyant type की company नहीं है, जिन्होंने right principle से काम किया है. तो ऐसा unicorn बने जिसकी life stage आपसे आगे हो. So thank you very much. I think a brilliant session, spoken from the heart, and both of you are incredible brands personally and the companies that you stand for. So thank you so much for your time. Shraddha, taking the time out, you've just recovered. Thanks again. And Alak, a pleasure to meet you. And both your humility and your passion stands out. So all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Avni. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Once again, thank you very much for such an insightful discussion. Now it's time for another insightful panel discussion on the topic fundraising in a difficult macro. Our first panelist is Mr. Ashwin Damera, CEO and co-founder of Unicorn Edtech startup Emeritus. He is passionate about making quality education accessible to the leaders of tomorrow. He is also a prominent angel investor and advisor to multiple startups. We have Mr. Krishna Kumar Natarajan as our second panelist, a leading authority in the global IT sector. Krishna Kumar Natarajan co-founded Mindtree. He also co-founded Mela Ventures, which invests in global B2B enterprise SaaS companies from India. Apart from building the startups ecosystem, he has been an active angel investor and has made over 30 investments in a wide range of companies that are technology-driven and span across consumer products, healthcare, logistics, financial services. We have Mr. Nitin Bhatia as our third panelist. He is the managing director of DC Advisory with over 16 years of education in technology and software experience. He has led some of the largest fundraising and M&A transactions in the Indian edtech sector. This session will be moderated by Mr. Anand Sudarshan, founder and director of Sylvant Advisor, which provides strategic advisory services in education sector to Indian and global institutions, large enterprises, and investors. Additionally, Sylvant incubates, invests in, and advises startup and early stage companies. May I request the audience to type in their question by clicking on the Q&A icon. They will be answered at the end of this session. Over to you, Mr. Sudarshan, for further deliberations.
Thank you, Dr. Tiwari. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm not sure if Ashwin has joined in because I'm not able to see him. If he is not, then we'll just wait for him to join. We'll get going in the meanwhile.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, KK. Good afternoon, Nitin. Absolute pleasure to be back amidst friends.
Thanks,
thank
Anand.
I thank
Anand.
NIIT. Thank Raji Pawar for giving this opportunity. And I'm here this afternoon on a noble quest. This is the quest for learning something new. And I'm looking forward to learning something new from the three of you. And along with me in this journey, all the entrepreneurs, others in the audience, I'm sure will learn as well. The topic that's been given to us is an interesting one, fundraising in a difficult macro. Before we get going, if I can outline the broad structure of the way we do it, we have time till 4:15, I think. No, 4:45, I believe. Nishit, till what time do we have?
Yeah, the program's at 4:30 since we'll overrun
4:30. So we'll, so 4:30.
I presume about 4:40.
4:40. Okay, we're just we're running a little late. So we will take time till 4:40. Organizers, I hope that's okay. And what we will do is to make this into a conversation, and we will make sure that we try and address as many questions as come in the chat, in the chat box. But we will also make sure that we have a few minutes right at the end where we try and summarize the key thoughts and the lessons that have come out, so that they remain in our minds as we go out. So let's get this started. I'm going to start with you, Nitin. I want to start with this definition of this topic, fundraising, which of course we understand, but fundraising in a difficult macro. What is this difficult macro that everybody seems to be talking about?
So I think the genesis of this term called difficult macro, as things stand today, has to do with the sort of Fed rate increase program that started, call it about a year back, roughly around that time frame. And to put things in perspective, literally from 0.25%, Fed rate has increased to 5%. And why is that important, right? Let's understand. So, essentially that's the rate at which US government kind of, a treasury operation work. This is the kind of creditworthiness of US government at one level. And subsequently, every single rate that is charged between any two organizations gets driven by this, right? So that's kind of fundamental. From a valuation standpoint, from share price standpoint, I believe, your audience would understand discounted cash flow and kind of, when people look at kind of, the cost of capital and therefore discounted cash flow, etc. One of the key ingredients there is risk-free rate, which kind of, in US dollar terms will be kind of measured by, the Fed rate, And therefore, when there is this, 4.75% to 5% jump, in cost of capital, it does something to kind of, discounted, present value of, cost of capital, right? So, so that's kind of, at one level, what has done. And this is, in my mind, a valuation kind of question. It also brings into play the liquidity question, right? So, when kind of money is in ample supply, free flowing, cost of capital is, close to zero, almost any opportunity looks interesting enough. And so people are, much more free with actually allocating capital, right? Whereas, when there is a cost of capital, let's say if I can park money at 5% with, Fed or at 7% with a bank, then I'll start thinking whether I want to kind of, give it to someone else, right? Which is kind of much more risky in my opinion. So increase in cost of capital does not only lead to kind of a valuation issue, it also leads to a liquidity issue, right? And if I were to therefore sort of think about the three things that an investor kind of eventually kind of very simply put, investor first is, look, do I like this business? Second, is it available at a price that I like? And three, do I have money to pay for this? Right? This change has impacted the question 2 and question 3. Right? So do I like the price? There is a change in notion that has happened, because the cost of capital has kind of changed. And then do I have the money for pay? Maybe in not every situation, especially in kind of VC world, it does not impact things that much. But if I'm a large strategic looking to do an acquisition, I need to see whether kind of, and a lot of acquisitions happen, using credit, right? So if credit is in short supply or kind of the cost of credit has gone up, then my inclination or willingness to kind of transact goes down. Similarly, if I'm a private equity firm, a buyout private equity firm, I typically use leverage to kind of transact. There is, in addition to equity, there's a debt or leverage that I kind of, pile up. And therefore kind of, that starts getting impacted. So, so those are the kind of, limitations or constraints that people are kind of working with.
And collectively, all of this ends up in creating a difficult environment for investors as a whole.
Anand, I'd just like to add a few more points. I think Nitin very subtly captured the macro environment. I also think with respect to the segments we are talking to, there is what I call difficulty in the sub-macro environment. While the issue of interest costs and cheap money going down is real, there is also a little bit of negativity which has got built around the tech as a segment. Because unfortunately, in the investment world, there is what you call a herd mentality, which happens many times. 2-3 years back, Edtech was the most hot opportunity. So even subpar businesses got invested. But the moment environment gets difficult, and the reason why it's got difficult is that there's a set of negativity prevailing around some of the so-called market leaders, which I think is a little bit also getting overblown. And then there is news about some of the Edtech laying off people, business models not being proven. So particularly in this segment, beyond the macro picture, which Nitin nicely captured, I think there's a sub-macro which is specific to this specific segment.
That's interesting. In fact, that's one of the things I was going to ask you anyway. So let me push that a little further, KK, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
So here is my thesis. My thesis is like this. And Nitin, this is applicable to you as well, because both of you look at life from slightly different points of view. Nitin as a banker, and therefore you see a lot of investors on one side, a lot of prospective investee companies on the other side. And KK, you have a combination of very deep expertise on building markets combined with, of course, your current role as an angel investor and as a VC investor. So my thesis is like this. My thesis says it is a difficult macro, and it's absolutely true that the submicro has some dynamics playing. Edtech has got some dynamics playing for it. But the thesis I have is this. When the going is good and there is a frenzy, right? That frenzy leads to non-differentiation. In other words, investors go after herd mentality that you spoke about, go after the same types of companies. So if a lot of people invest, I'm going to take 1 or 2 names, no disrespect to any of these companies, but I'm just using those names. If investors go after Unacademy and Byju's, other investors who can't get into that kind of a bracket of $50 and $100 million and or more will invest in companies which are like Byju and Unacademy. And therefore, in a world like the world of 2021, when a massive amount of money got raised and a lot of companies got funded in Edtech, I'm positing that it is actually more difficult for companies to differentiate themselves and raise money as against today when that frenetic pace is not there, there is a little bit of a time available for investors to lean back a little bit, be purposeful and consider things. And therefore, the opportunity is actually greater for differentiated companies because people have the time to think through, and look at models that they believe will make sense over a period of time. Does that make sense? KK?
Maybe I'll react a little differently. I think what you make, your thesis, I would agree with, except I think it applies little differently for what I call two category of investors. One category of investors, even the VC world, is what I would call more the momentum investors who see there's a gold rush and I want to be a part of the gold rush. I think rightly, they would not even participate in this because when the tide turns, they move to the opposite side of the table and then say, you know what, I won't touch Edtech at all. But what I would certainly agree as an outcome of your thesis is that I think there'll be more prudent and serious investors who want to build good businesses. They will look far more deeply, probe into the businesses, and good businesses which have certainly a sustainability and the ability to build value. I think they will get funded by more nuanced investors.
So more nuanced investors. Nitin, let me take that to you and maybe take this to hopefully to a logical kind of a conclusion. In your experience and what you have been observing, and you have been observing this sector, particularly the Edtech sector, you've been actually both participating in the flow as well as observing from the banks. You've had a very unique kind of a position for a long time now. In your view, that's right, 15 years, a long time. In your view, just look at the audience now, the ideas, them to be brimming with ideas. Do you see tonally 2023 and beyond to be different and more exciting? And I'm not saying easy, I'm saying more exciting as compared to for entrepreneurs in the tech in the subsector as compared to the earlier years.
So,
and I'm speaking mostly from a fundraising perspective, and fundraising as a milestone, not as an eventuality, but fundraising in the journey. They are fundraising is several rounds of funds as different milestones.
So, I'll say, Anand, that if I'm a EdTech founder, today, there will be no time that I should be actually more bullish than I am today, right? And that may sound contrary to kind of, what one is hearing about the macro and so on and so forth. But I mean, there's a rationale for that. So, let's start from the market opportunity, right? India has 250 million school-going kids. India has 9 million graduates every year and so on and so forth, right? It has always been a very large student market in education, right? Number one. Second, we have always been very poor in terms of quality of learning, right? So if you will look at sort of, various studies that have happened, you look at kind of, reading and math proficiency level for, grade 5 students, there is a report that gets published. There's another report that says 11% employability out of all kind of college grads and so on and so forth. So, fundamentally, India has been a market which has been very large historically, and at the same time, very poor in terms of quality of learning, right? Those realities remain unchanged, right? It's not like, in the last 5 years or 10 years, that reality that it's a large market with an unsolved problem, right? If I think about it, it continues to be a large market with an unsolved problem, right? The third thing, which is actually in some way good news, that has happened, is there were certain attempts that were made to solve these problems in certain form and shape. And you mentioned a couple of names there. After 5-6 years of that experimentation, in some way this current round kicked in with kind of the Byju's investment in 2016, which kind of really kind of accelerated this whole EdTech movement at that point in time. It is fair to conclude that there is still a lot to be done, right? And again, without kind of commenting on what someone has done well or not done well, physics wala has done well, somebody else has maybe not done well, etc. Reality is that after 5-6 years of this first level attempts, right, you have still come to a conclusion that much of this continues to remain unsolved. And therefore, anyone who has good ideas of how to solve this at scale has a pretty good shot at doing it, right? And again, since, I was listening to Alak in the previous, this thing. Now, somebody like a physics wala came in pretty late. They reinterpreted, the market, said, look, the market is not for 1 lakh students or 2 lakh students who have to pay 1 lakh rupee every year or 2 lakh rupee every year. There's a different way to use technology to attack this market. And you created an innovative offering and they have kind of taken off. So my simple belief is it's a large market, it's an unsolved problem. There's a particular way in which people try to tackle it. Some of it worked, some of it didn't work. End result is, it's the field is still wide open for new companies to emerge with new ideas, new thinking of how to kind of, attack these problems. And there will be fresh capital available. I mean, look, there is record dry powder. Everyone talks about it, now with, China in some way kind of taking a back seat in the minds of, the VCP community, more capital will flow. So, it's not like supply of capital is a constraint, right? I think the constraint is, demand coming from quality companies, quality businesses, quality ideas. So I there is no reason for us to be pessimistic. And this is kind of, my kind of message to your audience is there is just no reason for us to be pessimistic about, EdTech at this stage. Actually, there's a clear window or door that has opened up for new ideas to emerge and new disruptive businesses to kind of, scale and nurture.
No need to be pessimistic. Ideas will get funded because there is liquidity available, and India will be a destination of choice. And you have to distinguish yourself and differentiate yourself and provide or show that value exists. I'm going to take that to, but KK, but before I go there, I want to address one topical matter and kind of get that out of the way. Silicon Valley Bank, it's there in the papers. Everybody has read about it. And I want to, to ask you this question. In your view, the Silicon Valley Bank going bust, and by the way, it's not as much of a bust as it's been made out to be from whatever I can read.
Correct.
It's almost like somebody had written, the CEO and the executive team seem to have been like Boy Scouts rather than anything else, because the maths, when I was reading, didn't seem to make any sense to me. They didn't need to go down, but I don't understand it that well. But it's on the face of it at least. But that kind of a bust of a Silicon Valley Bank, which is really the bank that was deeply embedded into the startup system, at least in the US and many of the Western countries, does it affect the macro? And look at it, the sub-macro and sub-macro from two different points of view. A tech sector, India, from that perspective, does it affect at all?
See, my view on that is, while it would create some short-term liquidity issues, particularly for startups which have large operations in India and are domiciled in US. And if they've raised capital in US, they obviously would have put in some money into SVB. So it might create some short-term cash flow issues for them. And now with the government very intervening in a positive manner, whatever I heard from some of these startups is that they were able to access even that quantum of money on Monday, though they said Monday morning, I believe during the day they were able to access that capital. So I do not see that creating any impact in terms of either the Indian startup ecosystem or Indian startups which are really trying to access US as a market.
That to be a problem at all.
Yeah.
That's really good to hear. I think it's important for people to understand. There are some issues maybe for some people in the US ecosystem, but I think as entrepreneurs in the ecosystem and for investors looking at the Indian ecosystem, this may be a little blip maybe for some of them, but really speaking, not a big deal. I was just listening to the Nazara CEO on TV, who's one of the guys who got some money stuck there. I don't remember the amount. I think 75 crores or something like that, which is stuck there. And even he was pretty clear that he really wasn't that much worried. And the Edtech news item that was news release that was published very clearly says all of the money would be accessible, which is a big relief. It's not a fraction or whatever. So let me push on from there to the next level. So we have established this. We have established A, that you need to be a differentiated company. B, don't worry, opportunities abound. C, the India story, I think Nitin was at pains to point this out. The India story is a big story. This is a big market. It's a complex market. It's a market where lots of solutions are waiting to be discovered and delivered, and value is waiting to be created. And therefore, opportunities abound. There is absolutely no need for us to, worry ourselves about complicated macros, okay? Difficult macros and stuff like that. So with your permission, I'm going to change the topic, okay, of this session for the rest of the session. So I'm not going to talk about fundraising in a difficult macro. I'm just going to say fundraising. Okay, so we established, right, the difficult macro, maybe a little blip here and there, but it's not really a difficult macro. So let me just come back to fundraising per se for startups. I think, in your opinion, in your view, KK, I'll start with you first, which is what is it that startups need to do to focus on from a fundraising perspective as an investor sitting on the other side? I know you look at certain sectors, but if you wear the hat of all investors, VC investors particularly, what is it that you would be expecting startups sitting in front of you presenting their case to speak to you about? What is it that you will be looking for?
See, the first thing is a very clear articulation of what is the problem they are solving. And my second question is it the problem really to be solved, or it's not one of the top priority problems? And that's true across all segments, be it Edtech or be it B2B SaaS. I think the problem being solved should be a problem which needs to be addressed. The second key thing, of course, in any early stage investment, one looks at the team. How is it that they are gelling together? How are they going to really stay together? Because any business will go through significant ups and downs. And are they capable enough of solving difficult problems without sort of giving up? But the third aspect is really, how are they really getting to the market? Because particularly in a segment like Edtech, acquiring your customers at a reasonable cost really sort of paves the way for you to build a sustainable business. So how are they planning to do that? These are probably three top of the mind points which I would really look for.
So you talked about how well do they understand? Yeah, how do they solve the problem and how clear are they about the problem?
Yes.
The third was CAC. What was the second?
The second was the team. In fact, how do they bring complementary skills? How are they gelling together?
So the tangoing, Ashwin, hello. Good to see you here.
Thank you. I apologize for joining a little late.
No worries at all. Ashwin, just to bring you to speed very quickly, we have been talking about what is this difficult macro all about, and how does it affect? We very briefly spoke about SVB and the impact that it could have, the bust of SVB and the impact it could have. And this is what we have come to as a conclusion. Number one, in as far as India is concerned, in as far as the submicro, which is the Edtech sector, is concerned, we are very clear, at least between the three of us, we are very clear that the market is alive and well. There are a number of opportunities. It's a huge market, large number of opportunities that exist here. And there is really no need to complicate oneself by thinking about difficult macro and stuff like that. And if that's the case, we said that we'll change the session topic just a little bit. Instead of saying fundraising in a difficult macro, we just drop off the difficult macro and say, just focus our attention on What is it that entrepreneurs need to do to fundraise? I'll stop there, and I'll request you to just add your thoughts based on whatever we've said. Just if you can just add your thoughts and kind of get into the stream.
Thank you, Anand. So look, maybe a quick few points, right? Based on what I have heard from investors over the last, say, 6 months. One is, I'm not so sure the SVB issue is a big issue, but there are other issues, which is primarily two things. One, I would say, I want to break this up into two stages of companies, right? One is early stage and then late stage. In the late stage companies, so think of these as companies above $1 billion valuation, that is actually a tough space to raise capital. And there are many reasons for that. If I would just quickly summarize and say, look, there were many crossover funds, hedge funds who are investing in these companies. They also have public market exposure. Public markets have fallen 40 to 50%. And so they have to balance their portfolio. So they've stopped investing in private markets. Also public markets, which have liquidity, are far more attractive valuations. So if you are a late stage company, so Sunicorn, Unicorn, that kind, the market is really difficult to raise capital. But if you look at early stage, I'm not sure, especially for Indian companies, given the TAM and the addressable opportunities, I don't think there's a funding winter at all. Maybe more questions are being asked, but check size of $5 to $20 million, that's a very different type of a capital. That's a Sequoia, Axel, Lightspeed. They're growth investors. They don't have public market exposure. They are still writing checks. There are still deals to be done. So I think that's kind of one lens at which we can look at this funding winter. A lot of the noise around this is happening around late stage ventures. The second thing that I would also maybe just add is a lot of deals we're starting to see now are structured deals, whether it's a guaranteed IRR, whether it's a higher lick pref, whether it's a discount to the next round, or instruments that have some coupon plus some warrants and those kind of deals. A lot of innovative deals. And the question that is asked is why? And the reason is that despite whatever is happening in the macro environment around us, the truth is that there is still a lot of capital that needs to be deployed. Funds have raised in the last 1 or 2 years, record amount of capital. And so they have to still deploy. So there is still money chasing good deals. It's tougher for late stage companies. That's why you see a lot of the structuring. But for early stage growth companies, I think you're actually seeing deals still happen. And so depending on which stage of the spectrum you are as an entrepreneur, it's either a little gloomy or it's pretty bright.
Thanks, Ashwin. Just a quick follow-on. It's great points that you make. A quick point is this: think about structured deals, and I'm going to touch upon that a little later, but I want a clarification right now. The structured deals is a standard, playbook entry for PEs. For not now, it's been there forever. Any PE making an investment, in all probability, will come with some kind of a structuring or of some kind. Which will be part of the deal. It's nothing new, really. Are you saying this structuring piece is now moved into the sub $20 million early stage raises as well?
So Anand, look, the PE guys, if you look at, say, the large ones, Carlyle, KKR, General Atlantic, Warburg, a lot of them, yes, this is, like you have correctly said, this is bread and butter for them. But if you look at the investments, if you look at a year or two back, if they try to do those kind of deals for tech companies or consumer internet companies, they would not accept it. Like I've had this conversation 2 years back where there was a PE who said, I'll structure something for you. And I got a straight out equity deal at a valuation that we were comfortable with. And we took a straight out equity deal, right? However, in today's market, if there's no straight out equity deal, then you're much more open as a late stage company to look at these structured options. So I think you'll start seeing structured options in consumer tech, internet, high growth companies coming from these PE guys. However, like you rightly point out, it's more for late stage companies. For early stage companies, anyways, if you're looking at 15, 20 million, that's not where the PE guys play. That's still where the growth equity players are. And look, they anyway underwrite risk far more than a PE investor is willing to take, right? So I don't think we're seeing that much structure. In fact, if I could ever give advice to an entrepreneur, early stage, better you don't take structure. Take out straight deals, the valuation is lower, just sleep better at night and build for a much larger outcome. So it's really more in the late stage that we're seeing this.
No, fair enough. So let me just come back to the thread of our conversations earlier. Nitin, I'm going to continue that I'm going to summarize for Ashwin, and then I'm going to continue asking the question to you, and then I'll come to Ashwin after that. The question that I was asking KK, was that if therefore fundraising is the key point, and some of what you said is also, Ashwin, what you said also is pretty much pointing out to that, that, there is, markets to be conquered, there is value to be built, and there is money, there to support. So, Nitin, what KK said is three things. What's required is one, do you have a clear thought process, and do you have a solution that's got value in the marketplace? Second is, do you have a team that is gelling with each other, that's complementary in terms of skills and capabilities, and it's working well visibly? I suppose you didn't say that. I'm adding that an investor always looks for visible physics, chemistry, whatever you want to call it, between team members at some stage or the other. I suppose KK talked about that as well. And the third part, what he talked about, is the acquisition cost, consumer acquisition cost, CACs. Are they reasonable, handleable? How do they play with profitability, eventual profitability, and so on and so forth? All of that kind of together. What is your view? Are these the things that that entrepreneurs need to focus on, or are there more, or is there any other nuance of these three that you would like to highlight?
So I'll say some of these have always been there. So in fact, all three things that, KK mentioned have always been there. The nuance I'll say on two of those, see, what people have realized is that for a lot of these businesses, KK mentioned product market fit, right? People are having today a more nuanced and better understanding of what does the customer actually want, right? As an example, we had Alak, from Physics Wala in the previous conversation, and sort of, so there's, you can put a Physics Wala and a Vedantu model side by side, and you can start debating, what works, better in what context, right? So depending on customer segment, one solution may work better than kind of, something else, right? The second point is, and we saw this as we came out of, let's say, the COVID, related issue. During COVID, if you are an edtech company, you were essentially kind of competing with only other edtech companies, right? But once you kind of moved out, you are now competing also with other offline companies who have, compelling solutions. They have been successful and have been around for a while, etc., right? And therefore, the question is, when I'm going to compete with offline and online players, what is my product market fit, right? And, we have seen investors now having, let's say, a deeper understanding, a more nuanced view of what qualifies for a great product market fit, right? So that's a nuance in some way. The second piece is, and again, I'll take KK's point on kind of CAC and kind of, unit economics and so on and so forth. But I'll say that, again, it's kind of a little bit more, whole, in the sense that, and we call this as customer development in kind of, the parlance, which is, look, how I'm going to take this unit of scale and I'll scale it to like, 1 million, 10 million, 100 million, and so on and so forth, right? And, one part of it is whether the CAC works or not today. But, the other is that, the path to getting to 1 million users is different, from the path to getting to 10 million users, and it will be different to the path to getting to 100 million users, right? And therefore, do you have kind of, a more nuanced understanding of how you will continue to scale, right? So I'll say, 3 years back or 5 years back, you just had smaller edtech businesses, right, that were dealing with smaller set of numbers. You are today dealing with much larger set of numbers, and therefore, you have to revisit some of these questions. So if you are at 10 million users and your next target is 50 million users, you will have to think differently about customer development versus when you were 100,000 users and you had to kind of get to 1 million users. I'm just saying,
Okay.
These are different category of problems in some way that you have to think about.
Okay.
But I'll add two more things to what KK mentioned, which are new, right? One is the fact that the patience with respect to when investors were okay to see, let's say, a break-even point or a profitability point has shifted. So it is not enough for you to just say, I have product market fit, I have a solid customer development model, I have a great team, because if the way someone described it is, if earlier investors were okay having a telescope to profitability, now they want a binocular visibility to a profitability, right? Like, a telescope visibility to a profitability no longer works. You need a binocular, visibility to profitability, right? And kind of translated, when we are kind of, doing our work, we are advising companies that you need to demonstrate how you're going to get to profitability in next 18 to 24 months. Anyone who is kind of not guiding for, and we work generally with Series C, Series D and higher companies. So, that may be different for, a Series A, Series B company. You may have more, room to cover in terms of, path to profitability. But if you're a growth equity or a late stage growth equity company, right? And if you're guiding for more than an 18 to 24 month timeline to kind of profitability, that's a big problem. Right? And we just need to kind of be mindful of, and Anand, in pre-conversation, you were talking about narrative. So I believe, path to profitability, how you will get there with reasonable, assumptions and, demonstrating evidence is part of the narrative, right? It's not something which is an afterthought, it is a part of the narrative. The other thing that I'll say is that, the exit assumptions have changed. And what I mean by that is, 2021 and 2022 deals that were happening, it was okay to say I'm going to price myself as price to sales multiple of X, right? And that is good enough because other companies that are my peer group are also kind of getting done as a price to sales multiple, for example, right? Today, and I was listening to Rohit, who is the CIO of Temasek, give a chat, and that's kind of consistent with what a lot of other senior PE folks are saying. If you're an IC member in one of these PE firms, you are saying, guys, I'm going to get valued at exit on a price earnings multiple or an EV/EBITDA multiple, right? So I need to work backwards from, on a steady state basis, what kind of margin I have, what kind of profitability I have, etc. And I need to work backwards on what's the valuation I can pay today. So a pure, let's say, a comparison with peer group in terms of price to sales may not be the best way to present your narrative, right? You need to kind of change your narrative to, again, kind of incorporate the fact that in a steady state, this is the kind of profitability that this business can have. This is the kind of long range, valuation multiple that businesses like these can sustain for these reasons. Fair. And therefore, there's a fair valuation. Again, fair. The second thing is generally not pertinent. It is pertinent in this market because a lot of investors, and this is to the point that Ashwin is saying, the reason why structured deals are happening is because there is a disconnect between how companies think about valuation currently and how investors are thinking about valuation currently. And so you're finding a structure to kind of bridge that gap. But fundamentally, therefore, in the long term, right, if you have to return to a straight equity model, for example, you will have to translate your business journey into a language that customer can an investor can understand. And that will involve kind of talking about steady state margin, steady state profitability, and how soon you can get there in a much more.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Thank you. Ashwin, I'm just going to take it from there. I'm going to add one unrelated question to it because it's of, again, topical interest. Very quick answers because we're kind of running out of time. We have over 8 minutes more. Don't think we'll be able to take any questions from the audience today, but I'd like to take this and leave. So we've got 5 thoughts that have come up now, right? You've heard both KK and Nitin express 5 thoughts, which includes the solution side of it, which includes the team, which includes the cost of acquisition, which includes the path to possible, the visibility path to profitability, not telescope, it's more binocular, so long as it's not short-sighted. I think the rest of it is all okay. And the narrative, there's a broader narrative to the scaling part that Nitin talked about. Very, very quick this thing from you. And because I cannot have any Edtech conversation these days without touching upon generative AI, very quick, I would like you to add, how do you view generative AI impacting edtech businesses? Just for it. First, comment on these 5 points that I've made, add to it, nuance it for a couple of minutes, and then maybe a minute on generative AI before we sum up.
I mean, great point. And I like the way in which you summarize these 5 things. But, you know, sometimes 5 things is also too much for an entrepreneur to think about. So let's just make it one thing, right? And if there's any advice you can give an entrepreneur, I think Nitin mentioned this beautifully, which is profitability. And by the way, you know, even if you think about binoculars, I think that he's being a little charitable, saying you have 12 to 18 months. I think investors want to see profitability right now. And then only you're going to be really investable, and at least you'll get a valuation that's close to what maybe the entrepreneur wants. Because in many sense, right, all the stuff around customer, product, market fit, all of that is captured if you have profitable growth, right? So earlier it used to be you have to grow 80%, 100% year on year to be a good company. It doesn't matter how much money you lose. Today people are saying, look, you grow 20% also, it's fine, be profitable. And so the rule of 40, right, is your growth plus EBITDA, as long as that's 40% or more, I think it's come back. So if I were to just simplify it, clear path to profitability, if not profitability, even at a lower growth, is really what I think the edtech entrepreneurs need to think about. And if you think about it, look, edtech as a business, if you look at the entire consumer tech landscape, if there's one business that can actually be profitable and grow, it should be edtech. If you really think about it, there are many characteristics, you know, of all of us, I mean, who have run edtech businesses or education business. If you really think about it, right, you connect your money from your students upfront, you may pay your faculty and partners over a period of time. So why would you not be profitable? And I think in the next 12 months, you're going to see many companies pivot to that profitability, including, you know, ourselves. On the generative AI piece, look, in a moment where you're thinking about path to profitability, generative AI may be a luxury to think about. That's one thought. But the other way to think about it is it's here, it's now, right? And we are having conversations in our company today itself, which is, you know, and by the way, it's linked to profitability also in a certain sense. It's also linked to customer delight in a different sense, right? But if I take some of our grading and stuff, there's a lot of grading. If you grade, say, you know, 1,000 assignments, 800 of them could have been done well by something like a chat GPT because they follow a certain pattern. You have a solid rubric, you can figure that out. Maybe that 20% requires some manual intervention. In terms of a tech business that's looking to scale, there's a massive cost advantage. There's also a customer delight. You can grade assignments like literally very fast versus manually, et cetera, right? But I also would caution that we're in very early stages of figuring this out. There are going to be a lot of use cases, but we're still very, very early, and actual adoption is still very nascent.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. That's all we have time for, actually. We've been asked to speed up, and the next session is already getting delayed. So here is my takeaway from this very interesting conversation. If you had to walk back as an entrepreneur, I would walk back with the following things. Number one, don't get hassled by all these difficult macro business, right? The Indian story, the edtech sub-story, as what KK pointed out, the opportunities that are there in India, they are real. Money that's available to be invested, particularly for early stage companies, is very much there, and it's real. It's like Nitin pointed out, you know, fact of the matter is, you know, there aren't too many other options in really growth markets except India. Therefore, people will look at India, are looking at India very aggressively. So do not worry about that. But for you to be able to succeed and raise money, if you were to focus on it, think of this as a visual, I think visually. So this is a visual metaphor for you to remember. Think of an arrow. Okay, the feathers of the arrow will include what is the solution that you're offering, and what is the kind of team that you have put together, right? Very strong focus on unit economics, cost of acquisition, and so on and so forth. And of course, what are your strategies, thought processes, capabilities? What is your willingness to add on to capabilities as you start scaling and imagining scaling as you go forward? And some of it will be a kind of a step function. And sometimes it might be depending on your nature of your solution and the market that you're playing in, the curve may be a little different. But the tip of the arrow is profitability. and profitable growth, as what Ashwin. So think of that as possibly a single visual metaphor that you can keep and take away from here. Just I want to add the last point that Ashwin made about generative AI, because that must be a curious question that must be there in everybody's mind. And like he rightly pointed out, we still are yet to find out what exactly generative AI is going to do. It is clear, absolutely clear. I'm talking Edtech and education here specifically. Generative AI is there to impact education sector, Edtech sector in a big way. No questions about it. I, for one, think, and this is not the forum for a conversation, and I'm very happy to do another conversation on this. I, for one, happen to think that generative AI is actually throwing up a massive amount of opportunities, two kinds of opportunities, new opportunities for entrepreneurs such as yourselves to build your stories around, and an opportunity for differentiation for existing companies, unicorns, companies such as Ashwin's, others who are building to unicorns, and unicorns are building to become larger organizations. It gives them a great opportunity to differentiate themselves, because this is where they can introduce incremental value, which can itself grow into a new branch and a new set of values per se, I believe. So that's a very interesting part. On that point, I'd like to thank all the panelists. Thank you very much for your insights. I hope it was of use to all of you, audience.
Yes.
And I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Thanks to NIT for putting it all together. Back to you, Nishit.
Thank you
Thanks,
very much.
Anand.
Thank you all for such an engaging discussion. It was indeed a very intriguing session, and it was a treat to listen to you all. Up next, we have the fireside chat with Mr. Kunal Bahel on what are the pitfalls that early stage founders should avoid. Kunal Bahel is a technology entrepreneur and investor. He is the co-founder of Ace Vector Group, which is the holding company for Snapdeal, Unicommerce, and Stellaro brands. Kunal is also the co-founder of Titan Capital, which has backed world-class entrepreneurs with operator-led early-stage capital in 250-plus startups, including EdTech startups like TechMint, BlueLearn, Invact, Yellow Classes, Skillovilla, among others. Kunal is an influential voice on issues pertaining to Indian startups and entrepreneurship. He will be joined by Mr. Rajendra Singh Pawar, Chairman and co-founder in NIT Group. May I request the audience to type in their questions by clicking on the Q&A icon. They will be answered at the end of this session. So without any further ado, over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Neha, and thanks, Kunal, for your time. With 250 investments, I don't know what all keeps you awake and what lets you sleep, but I'm sure now you've come to a point where it matters less and less, and therefore you can sleep better and better. I'm sure that is so. Now, for everybody who's listening, I do want to say that I talked to Kunal briefly, and I was saying that pitfalls, and he said, look, why talk of pitfalls? Let's be a little more positive on things. And while I agree with him, I do think that, those who have done the path, look back at some things which we could have easily avoided, right? In hindsight, they look damn easy and say, forget it. But then if we can stand on a hillock and watch, and we see most people fall in that pit, right? So some pitfalls are therefore easier to see in hindsight, but remain invisible, even though people may learn or read about them. So it is in that context, Kunal, having watched so many people walk the path, that you're in a very special position to really start generalizing on something which, oh shucks, I hope this guy doesn't do it, and everybody seems to do it, and so on. So I do want to start by saying that, 2 or 3 things which you've seen to be such things which are highly avoidable, but most people don't see till they get there. Maybe let me start by your listing 2 or 3, and then we'll get into a little more detail.
Sure. So firstly, thank you for having me join this incredible forum. I was listening in on the prior discussion with a lot of interest, and I really appreciate giving me the opportunity to participate in this forum. And sir, you yourself are an inspiration for generations of entrepreneurs, including myself. So it's always a pleasure to be speaking with you. Look, I feel that you're right. I think over a period of time, one does start seeing patterns across segments of companies and stages of companies. And look, none of the founders, I feel, make those errors knowingly. They have the right intentions, they have a lot of ambitions, they have starry eyes, but sometimes it is those starry eyes that lead them to a place that they shouldn't have gone to. And even from my own personal experience, I've learned some of these lessons. I would say the first and foremost one would be just lack of focus. It is always more exciting and it is always more celebrated by the media when companies do a lot of things. They become like a factory of new initiatives, where they're launching a new initiative a week or every month and putting out press releases and giving interviews, and everyone likes their name showing up in, or their company's name showing up in the newspaper often, at least in the
I think image is frozen. So Nishit or someone, just see what we can do.
I think Kunal's internet is down, perhaps has just gone down. Maybe he'll come back. He'll have to rejoin.
Okay, so yeah, he's back.
Yeah, he's back. He's back.
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know. I got bumped out. So I was saying, so one is obviously focus. Just moving to the next one would be, there's a lot of talk of profitability. I heard in the prior session, there was also talk of profitability. I actually feel that it's not that founders are just waking up to profitability as something that they need to pursue now. Profitability was always the guiding metric. It's just that nobody knew, or most founders didn't know, even investors, I would say, didn't know how much time would it take and how much money would it take for this company to become profitable. So in the era of when money was coming thick and fast, it was one of those things that kept on getting kicked down the can, that kept on getting kicked down the street. But profitability has always been the guiding metric. But now founders are obviously realizing that it has to come sooner. And related to profitability is just focus on unit economics. Even if the company is very small, it's only in its third month of operation, you can start telling whether you can say that whether this is a 10% margin business or a 50% margin business. And it's rare for a company to go from being a 10% margin business to a 50% margin business over time and yet be in the same business. It can go from 10 to 50, but it likely will be a different company, a different business, different industry, different sector altogether. So knowing whether it's a squirrel with a tail or elephant with a trunk is very important in even at the earliest stages, because it's almost like launching a projectile where depending on whether it was 3 degrees or 6 degrees, you land on Mars or Pluto. So I would say these are the 2-3 things, which is focus, profitability, and obviously within that unit economics of the business.
I think that's a good start, and in many ways a good summary as well, but we'll come back to that. So first thing I want to probe your mind about is, this whole issue of what drives most entrepreneurs. And I know it's not easy to come to this, but I know that very often, and I saw it in Edtech, that when some sectors really blowing into good, massive kind of size, a lot of people who are more carried away by that opportunity in that sector and may or may not have a deep emotional connect with that subject. And but when things are normal, perhaps people connect a little more with what's driving them. So, of course, to me, to me, my view is you have to first get in touch with what's driving you. But what have you observed, and what is, it's also not very easy to tell people figure out what's driving you. So this whole issue of the external motivations and intrinsic motivation, how do you see this playing, and what's a bit of advice for people to?
Yeah, I feel that chasing the hot sector will give you pleasure, but chasing your passion will give you happiness. And in many times I've seen founders like, Web3 is hot, chalo, everyone is running after Web3, and within 3-4 months they realize they have no point of differentiation, they have no category context in their minds, and there is no reason for them to succeed in that category or that sector. So I do feel that it always starts from a place of personal passion, where you feel you can have enduring interest in that space, because as sir, as a very successful entrepreneur, there'll be so many twists and turns in the journey. Most things will not go as per plan, that if you don't have this irrational amount of energy and passion for the problem statement, there'll be many situations that'll make you give up. So it does start from a place of passion and interest. And that's why I always would guide founders that, hey, take your time to decide what you want to do, because this is going to be a 10, 15, 20, maybe 30, 40-year journey for you. Why do you want to decide in 2 weeks what you're going to do for the next 10, 20 years of your life? So founders don't spend, they spend less than 1% of the time in deciding what they're going to do for 99% of the time, which seems completely irrational if you think about it. So I at least always will probe founders, like, why have they picked the space that they've picked? What interests them? What do they think can go wrong? What is the worst case scenario? What's the best case? Just try and go after it from different angles to make sure that more than me, they are convinced that they want to pursue this for, if people have a working life of 40 years, then at least for 25-30% of their working life, they want to spend on this problem statement. It is that important a decision. And with respect to the opportunity itself, I feel there are no bad opportunities. Most founders, there's always this obsession around, let's go after a large TAM. But there is nothing known as a large TAM, because all early stage companies start with a very, very narrow sliver of a problem statement. And then as they become successful in that and build some core competence in that, some reason to win in that, then they start adding more and more and more on the side to grow the TAM that they are going after. I've seen that most very good founders will figure out ways of how to grow the TAM versus starting with the largest TAM, because starting with the largest TAM means nothing, because it's not like you can go after all of it on day 0 or day 1 anyways. You can only go after a very narrow problem statement and deliver on that better than anyone else, so that you have the right to go after a larger TAM after that. But it all has to start from a place of personal interest, personal passion, and personal desire to make things better, like 10x better than they are being done in that particular space.
That's great advice. That's great advice. Now, one more thing I want to touch on, and since you have also put your fingers into Edtech, many parts of Edtech, is a whole area of regulation. I'm talking currently external regulation, not governance, internal. In areas like education or healthcare, which kind of sit somewhere in between what's a public good that government should deliver, but cannot deliver, and therefore opens up to the non-government for-profit sector. At what stage in their thinking should startups or youngsters who want to get into this field invest time to understand that? How realistic is it to expect someone excited about teaching kids to even know there is something called regulation? And what is your observation here?
Obviously the Silicon Valley mindset has always been, throw caution to the winds, caution to the regulators, and unless you have the regulator slapping you on the wrist, you haven't taken enough risk. That's sort of the, I'm grossly generalizing, but that's generally been the Silicon Valley methodology, like go fast, break things, and that type of stuff. I feel that that approach, like, I personally don't completely agree with that approach. I feel different countries countries are operated differently for cultural differences, the business culture differences. Each country has its own business history. At least whenever founders ask me about this, I would always say that, look, let's try and build a business that's riding the tailwinds of regulation versus trying to find air pockets in regulation or points of arbitrage in regulation, because those are only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time that those usually get plugged. We've seen that over the last 1 year in fintech, where there were a lot of air pockets that companies had found in the financial services regulation and built good businesses which customers were liking. They were usually sat in a gray area of regulation. And then one fine day, a notification comes from RBI and those businesses no longer can operate, literally starting that very moment. And I feel that why take such a risk? Why spend years of your life and your team's life building something that has such a binary risk, where you may have done everything right, but there's one very major thing that you did not do right, which is operated in a gray area of regulation. And for that, all the hard work, all the years, all the capital, all the team that you built, all of that can go waste. Rather pick a space, pick a problem statement, or come up with a solution that's riding the regulatory waves, because regulation is not necessarily bad. Like, we think of regulation as a bad thing and it's something which is anti-business, etc. But that's not necessarily the case. It also helps to maintain decorum. It helps to maintain some amount of rationality and discipline in the way industries are built. And so that various market players play according to the same set of rules, and then merit wins. So at least that's been I know it's a slightly conservative approach coming from a tech founder, but it's the approach that has served me personally well in the choices we made when it comes to regulation. And it served the companies that we've had the fortune of advising and investing in well as well.
So this is one of those classical pitfalls which I talked about, that after you've been through it many times, then you can value it much more and look simple. So it's good you emphasize this, because I think there's a emerging kind of tightening on government regulation on this sector, and therefore better to invest time.
I would also add to it, sir, that a founder and a team and a startup have so many pressures and stresses and anxieties. Yeah. Why add one more to it, which is so catastrophic if it plays out the wrong way? Why add to it? Like, I have no problem if I can sleep peacefully at night. I don't want to add anything on my plate that takes away the peace of mind and and having a good night's sleep.
Perfect. Then I want to talk a bit about, the dimensions of distinctiveness or uniqueness. Everybody talks about that in this commonplace, that you have to differentiate. So in this space, among the companies that you've been watching in the EdTech space, are there any special one or two dimensions of distinctiveness that people can keep in mind? So when they're building the plan, they should think about the following things, one or two or three. Not too many. Distinctiveness you need on one or two dimensions.
Yeah, I feel that, everyone wants to build a world-class company, right? All founders, they come in thinking, I'm going to build the best company in the world doing whatever they are pursuing. But being world-class comes with being excellent at something, like 10x, 20x better than someone else. And being excellent comes with acute amount of focus, which is the point I'd earlier made in the first question also. And oftentimes, what one sees companies wanting is not that they don't know the fact that they need to be distinctive. The problem is that they know what they can be distinctive at, but they don't want to focus on it, because they always feel this fear of missing out on the three other paths that they could take. But going deep on one dimension of distinctiveness is usually more important than try and be a jack of many such jack of trades on many such dimensions. So one example from the e-commerce world would be Nykaa, for instance. Right? There was a time when all e-commerce companies about 10 years ago wanted to sell everything. And Nykaa came along and said, look, I will just take this one part, one category, which is really very small, nobody is paying attention. Let me just focus on that one category, and I'll build a lot of like layers of capabilities and moats around that in terms of videos and influencers and celebrities and private labels and the way I do logistics, the way I do marketing and advertising, which becomes in aggregate highly irreplicable. And at some level, the distinctiveness was not in the fact in terms of the products that they were selling or the category they were selling. Distinctiveness was in the fact that they decided to focus only on that and then build all kinds of capabilities around that. So, there are obviously going to be many similar looking businesses, but I do feel focus around that problem statement that you've picked is highly underrated. And usually you don't find many companies go to the depths of pursuing that single problem statement.
And the last question, we did start 10 minutes late, but we'll try and at least save 5 minutes. We have another 4 or 5 minutes. Is that in raising capital, looking for capital, are there any 1 or 2 smart ideas? I don't want to say pitfalls, but any smart ideas based on what people have done and what they could avoid as mistakes? And
Look, I feel that founders at some level getting investment is, if you invert the problem, invert the statement, selling shares. Like getting investment is the other side of the coin is you're selling shares, and you're likely selling the most valuable product of the company, which is your shares, right? More than the service or the physical product that you manufacture as a company. So the right approach, I feel, is, approaching it almost like enterprise sales, where if you're going to sell some really expensive product or service, how do you do it? You would figure out that, okay, basis what I do, who is the right target audience? Not everyone is going to be my audience. If I sell, coffee cups, there's no point in me going to a fashion store, right? I'm going to go to home stores. So similarly, if there's an X type of business I do, if I'm running an Edtech business, I'd rather create the universe of all the Edtech investors in India and the world, and then create a big funnel at the top, because I cannot predict what the conversion rate would be. And then doing a lot of research on the investors, making sure that you're tailoring your narrative around the business to what the investor obviously has a thesis around. That doesn't mean, I don't mean that founders should be disingenuous in terms of just changing the business that they are in every time they meet a different investor, but it's about telling your narrative in a way that the investor would understand better. And obviously so that is on the investor selection and how to go after them and how to create a funnel, not dissimilar from how enterprise sales is done. But I also feel that additionally, what many times founders don't pay enough attention to is how much the investors care about the broader team. There's often a lot of emphasis on founder, but actually what we look for when we are making investments is who else is on the team, even if it is 2 other people outside of the 2 founders, because that gives a good sense for the quality of the barometer of talent that these founders think is high quality, because that sets the tone for rest of the organization that they're going to build over a period of time. That gives great confidence, because all said and done, while we treat founders as these superhumans and supermen and superwomen, at some level without their teams, they are incapable of achieving anything. So if they are at the earliest stages without any capital or material amount of capital, without any progress, revenues, MIS, etc., or PR or recognition, if they can mesmerize really high quality people to come join them in their journey, that to me is a very, very strong indicator of the quality of the founder and their ability to build an organization that will deliver on their vision in the future. I would say these are, in my mind, 2 of the. One is how to approach investors, and outside of the basic stuff, everyone will talk about the TAM and all the usual stuff everyone is very smart about. But what I find usually missing is emphasis on the broader team, which I feel can be a real deal maker in some ways.
Great. So I think we've covered what I thought are most areas. Is there something I had missed to ask you, which you think we do want to tell our young early stage?
I think you asked a lot of really good questions, and I feel that we covered a lot of things, but this is a vast topic, and one could probably keep going on and on. I do feel one thing that that is often asked by early stage founders is around culture, right? That how do you build a great culture? Because culture is often equated, at least in Valley terms, to free food and free parties and free massages, etc. Obviously, all that is changing in today's financial environment. At least I've seen in all the companies we've built, whether investment side or operating side, the average tenure is more than 5 years, and that's an eternity in the startup world. And the reason for that is we've always emphasized on transparent, frequent, and honest communication. Because when founders are transparent, honest, and frequent in their communication, when times are tough and every company sees its tough times, that's when your team stands shoulder to shoulder with you to help you tide through those periods. So I've always recommended to founders that from day one, even when you have 3 employees, just communicate, and that'll serve you well in the very long run.
Excellent. I think even the earlier panels, I think these ideas are echoing, and I'm imagining myself to be an early stage and see, okay, which are things which everybody is saying, and you touched on some of the things that others are saying as well. So I won't try and summarize, except to pick some nice sentences. You said that in the area of focus and early profitability, and what range will it be? So is it a squirrel with a tail or elephant with a trunk? You have to at least figure out what you're getting into, and of course, as you said, that focus is key, and focus comes not only here. Focus also comes, as you said, when you're looking at where do you want to be distinctive, not only the market, but also how, the one thing in which you'll be really good and 10x better. So focus comes through clearly, and not as a surprise that personal passion should be the starting point. And so get rid of the fluff which is happening, be in touch with yourself, you're saying, and listen to what you're saying, and you use the term irrational energy. You should have irrational energy and take your time, I think, to figure out, because it's an important question. It's not easy to figure out. You made that very important point. And I think in looking for capital, of course, looking at which other people who invest in that area, but much more than that, what will they look for and present the depth of talent quite clearly. I think that's very important advice, because people just look for a team. And I think you're saying, in the spirit of transparency, let people see what you see as your depth of talent with pluses and minuses. And transparency, I think, in being there to say, this is it and this is not there. And so that's very important. And on regulation, I did use a very nice phrase, which is follow the tailwind. Don't look for opportunistic things, because it can hit very, very hard. So with that, thanks so much. I think it's been extremely valuable to me, refreshed many, many ideas and brought in some new ones. And I'm sure that our participants and people who are attending will find a lot of value in what you said. And so once again, thanks so much, Kunal. Very, very grateful to you for finding the time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Back to you, Neha. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. It was an extremely enlightening session. Next in line, we have a panel discussion on building a sustainable edtech startup. Our first panelist is Mr. Mohan Lakhamraju, founder of Great Learning, one of the India's fastest growing edtech startups. He co-founded Great Learning with a vision to make it a lifelong learning partner for young professionals, and scaled it profitably with millions of learners across 170 plus countries. He is also the vice chairman of Great Lakes Institute of Management. Our second panelist is Mr. Sajid Pai, one of the partners of Bloom. At Bloom, Sajid supports investments in EdTech, HRTech, AgriTech, and B2B marketplaces. Sajid is a prolific writer. His writings cover startups and e-commerce to culture and education, and have been published in Scroll, Quads, BuzzFeed, and the Times of India. Our third panelist is Mr. Rajiv Jayaraman, CEO of Knowlscape, an integrated learning and assessment platform. Knowlscape raised strategic investment from NIIT Limited in 2022. Over the years, he has built a high-octane team that delivers stellar technology-driven learning experiences for learners across the globe. He is also a visiting faculty at various leading B schools and has prior working experience at Oracle. This session will be moderated by Mr. Ravi Garikipati, co-founder of Davinta FinServe and ex-CTO of Flipkart. He's also a board member at NIIT, Axis Mutual Fund, and 5paisa. He has also invested in multiple Edtech startups. May I request the audience to type in their question by clicking on the Q&A icon. They will be answered at the end of this session. Over to you, Ravi.
Thank you, Neha. I really appreciate the intro, and welcome the panelists. I must say the very eminent panelists, and like I said to some of you, just came back from a US trip, and I'm hitting the ground running. And the best way to get the thing going is to have this engaging and intellectually stimulating conversation with all of you. And hopefully, this will mean a lot for some of the young entrepreneurs out there who are dialing into this panel discussion. I'll give my opening remark. The topic is pretty broad. I think this is pretty relevant for any startup, and maybe we'll get into some nuances as to how to build a sustainable edtech startup as part of our panel discussion. But for me, simply put, sustainable business or startup is one where you're building something that lasts for, I wouldn't say eternity, for a great length of time. And sustainability, oftentimes people refer to and the growth and profitability, but I think it's layered across many dimensions. How sustainable is the product or service that you're building from relevance standpoint? How sustainable the growth and profitability, which is oftentimes the most commonly referred when you look at sustainability, and then how sustainable the purpose and vision for which you come together as a founding team to build what you're building, right? And also the values and culture and the vision that you put in place. Are you staying the course? Are those elements sustainable as you're building and fast forward few years from the beginning? And also the talent, right? And are you able to sustain the same quality of talent that you had at time T1 when you're going through the 0 to 1 phase to where the business is heading, and seemingly in the growth phase and beyond? So are you able to sustain the quality of talent? So it's kind of layered across various dimensions, and at least in my head, when you look at sustainability, you have to cover some of these aspects. And I do know from my experience, having seen few companies built both out of Valley and even in Indian context, looking at these dimensions very closely at different points in time, very diligently, I must say. And those ones who do that and address that carefully with a considered effort, they really stand out, and they truly become a sustainable businesses. So that's my take. I'm sure three of you will have great insights into this topic, and looking forward to engaging with all of you. I just want to tee up with one open-ended question, and understand, at very high level, your definition of sustainability as it relates to your businesses. Many of you build businesses. Mohan, you built a couple of businesses. You're building another one as we speak. And Rajiv, we just embarked on some exciting startup journey of your own. And Sajid, you've been at the forefront of investing many earlier startups, and some of them have gone past 0 to 1 and seemingly attaining that sustainable sustainability phase. So what's your definition? Is there any common definition that we can align to? All right. So I want to just make it open-ended, and maybe start off with you, Mohan, and I'll go with you, and then hear others' comments as well.
Thank you, Ravi, and thanks to you and to NIIT University for having me participate in this panel. I appreciate being with all of you stalwarts. So I think you touched upon several aspects of it yourself, Ravi, in your opening remarks. I, for ease of, for simplicity, think about it in maybe three things. So one is financial sustainability, which means that, whatever the business is offering, in our case, whatever services and products that we are offering are making enough money, to meet all of our costs and to give us money to invest, to reinvest in keeping us innovative, to keeping us generating new products, to evolve our existing products. So we are not dependent on any external cash, right? So that's the financial sustainability part of it, right? So it's not enough to just break even. The business has to generate enough cash to keep the product engine and the innovation engine running, right? So all great companies have that. So that's one. Second is organizational sustainability. And what I mean by that is something that you already alluded to, which is that you have the processes, the technology, the systems, the know-how, all of that sufficiently codified, sufficiently implemented that it is not any individual dependent, right? So, we are not there yet. I think that's work in progress. One of the reasons me and my team continue to be motivated by what we are doing is because we want our organization and our business to continue to have impact long after we are gone, right? That's why we started this, so we believe in what we do and we wanted to keep doing it and compounding that impact, for a long time. And we are not there, and we are very motivated to get there. So that's something that we are working on. Okay. So that's the second one. Third is, in some sense, competitive sustainability, right? So how will you basically sustain in a competitive environment? And, so that's a function of many things. What's the reputation that you have? Like what kind of brand have you created? Is there enough pull, enough trust in that brand, right? So, and, is there enough quality that you have been able to engineer into whatever you're offering so that that reputation will hold you in good stead, regardless of what new competition might come up, and what threats the business might face from a competitive perspective. Can it sustain that, right? So I think if we have solid answers to all of these questions, I think, then the business is not dependent on any founder or individual or anything like that. So that's how I would think about it.
Excellent. Thank you, Mohan. That's a great way of teeing off. And Rajiv, what's your take? Are you seeing in your business some early indicators of sustainability? Are you still working towards it? If so, what are the areas? What is your definition?
Yeah, so tough act to follow after Mohan has structured it so well. I would think about it from similar lines, financial sustainability to begin with. Second is the business model sustainability. So much is changing in the world around us in terms of, EdTech itself, the technologies, the and the academic institutions, corporates. So much is changing on that front. And, from a stakeholder perspective as well, there are too many of them in the environment that we operate in. So if you take the K-12 space, broadly speaking, there are parents, there are students, there are academic institutions. So sustainability is, doing good for all of them, right? So that it has a long-term meaning. And the one keyword that I often think about when I think about sustainability is relevance, right? Over a period of time, how do you continue to stay relevant, right? And for that, there is an element of reinvention that needs to happen. And that to me is at the crux of sustainability. From our personal journey, we started off in India and APAC. Right now, the journey is taking us to the US and UK. And that's, as you know, in the corporate learning space, that's the biggest market there is. And of course, with NIT, the partnership I have with them as well. Really excited to be on that journey to expand our mission of helping organizations and leaders become future ready through experiential learning. So that's the path that we are on. And yeah, in a nutshell, how do you continue to stay relevant over a period of time for so many different stakeholders? That's how I view it.
Thank you, Rajiv. Over to you, Sajid. As a VC, and having invested in many early stage startups across many verticals and domains, what is your take on sustainable business? And do you have any special regard or a reference to EdTech sustainability? Do you see that being very different from some of the other verticals where you invested. That Edtech in itself poses certain opportunities and challenges that make us look at sustainability differently.
Sajid, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Thank you for this, Ravi. And Mohan and Rajiv have covered many aspects and they've kind of structured it very well. From a venture perspective, and specifically from the lens of early stage startups, but also seeing growth companies, we have an academy, we have Class Plus, etc. I would say that sustainability to me is when you have a business model, when you have a revenue model, when you have an organization that is on a path where even if you shut off any future tap to capital. So a sustainable company may be profitable, it may not be profitable because it may have decided that with the capital that it has got, an edtech startup may eschew profitability for market share gains or in reinvesting in the business, etc. So it may not be profitable, but it is sustainable when, even if there is no future capital, it can quickly take the measures to become profitable. And fundamentally, the business is contribution margin positive, broadly in almost EBITDA positive, and they're only negative because they're reinvesting in the business. So in such a context, a business is fundamentally sustainable. A wonderful definition comes from YC, which has this term called default alive and default dead. Sustainable startups are default alive and default thriving. So this is sort of my lens through which I look at sustainability. It's not as erudite as what Mohan said, but I think it gets the job done for our startups, which, yeah.
No, absolutely it does. Very well put, Sajid. Excellent, excellent. So with that, I think we have a common understanding, and all of us alluded in your own way, very eloquently, what sustainability should stand for, regardless of which domain. And I don't think the definition changes because we are dealing with the edtech as a domain. I think they're largely same across all domains, and very well put. Now, taking it a little further into a few nuances, Rajiv, I'll start with you. You've embarked on this entrepreneur. I thought you had a few other gigs. Maybe I've read that incorrectly, and you corrected me saying that this is your first gig, and you've spoken like a very seasoned founder. Maybe that's what got me into that thinking. What is the role of product market fit when it comes to attaining sustainability? I know we all heard the importance of PMF, and every founder gets his head around that. Every investor insists on you getting a PMF in place, and so on and so forth. Well, how important is that as you working towards attaining sustainable business?
That's a great question, Ravi. So I think prior to product market fit, there is a founder idea fit from a sustainability standpoint, right? Because we are in this for the long term, and if you're building this for a period of time, an idea needs to invigorate the person, the founder, the founding team, right? I find that to be incredibly important. Otherwise, you lose steam along the way. So having said that, I think product market fit, as we all know, is extremely important. Not just from a $0 to $1 million perspective, right? Which obviously is crucial from a PMF standpoint, getting that right, because that sort of sets the stage for what's going to happen next. The learning that one gets during that phase becomes foundational for what the organization will do until the next milestone. But the tricky thing I've realized from the product market fit concept itself is that keeps changing. It's not a point in time where you say, aha, now I've reached this and this is all set. Because in our own case, from APAC to India to now the global market, you take the same product, same platform, it may not end the same way. Even though we work with 400 plus global enterprises, large names in this part of the world, the same companies in a different geography might react very differently to the idea. Right. And so the nuances there are very critical. Same way, the same product or platform we have created for the enterprise market, does it work well for the partner network? Maybe not, right? And so there are those instances where we need to go back to that product market fit to see if this is still relevant. Going back to what I was saying, as we expand, how do we stay at the core of it and never lose sight of the product market fit, or don't take anything for granted, because the external environment is changing. And that's where I think companies also lose the plot, because they take that as granted and then they start building the rest of the stuff. And then they realize that the core foundation itself has shifted. That sort of comes in the way of sustainability.
No, excellent point. I think you really hit a nail on the head. I think, while the core PMF will remain intact, and I think it should remain intact, but I think you're alluding to one important point where the product market fit will have to morph or adapt itself to various geographies, various customer segments that you're going after, and various time scenarios. What looked absolutely relevant from product market fit at time T1 may be requiring some change at T2. That doesn't mean you waver from your core product focus. But I think being cognizant of those nuances is very important for sustainability. I think the point very well made. Thank you. Mohan, and coming back to you, and you have built many startups, and all of them have gone on to become almost like institutes. And they're probably a no better person than you to answer this question and provide you insights to some of the entrepreneurs out there on this call. As we know, the entrepreneurial journey is always founder driven. The passion, the irrational energy, exuberance that founders bring, and they're building something in the 0 to 1 stage, and they are there pretty much in every facet of startup build out. And then as they go past that, there is this conundrum that they have to grapple with. If you sort of take our eye off the ball, or let somebody else look at XYZ or ABC, things may not pan out the way we built up until now, and so on and so forth. And then without realizing, he or she becomes a bottleneck. So the importance of what I'm getting to is the importance of hiring the right people, building right processes, and bringing right systems in place. So most of things will I wouldn't say be taken care by themselves, but not wholly dependent on founders and few key founding team members. So I'm sure you've done it, and I would like to hear your insights as to how a founder navigates from 0 to 1 to this, and how that will help building the business sustainable.
Yeah. So I think, for me, people are everything. I think, people are number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for anything. And this was, some conversation came up the other day when I was saying this. People build companies, people build organizations. Capital doesn't build organizations. Capital doesn't build businesses. People build businesses, right? So people are extremely important. And I think for any founder, for any entrepreneur, I think having a few trusted, dependable people are the best gift, the best asset that they can hope to have, right? And, at different stages, you need different skills. If you're lucky, the people that you have will transcend those skills. And if you're not, then you have to find new people. And, at some point, you have to keep finding new people. Right. And so I think that's where I heard Kunal, briefly in the previous conversation, the culture and the values that you build into the organization, and those get usually determined by the initial set of people. Right. So, as an entrepreneur, I have a certain view. We are very mission driven. So I care deeply about what we do, enabling career success for people through high quality and, transformational education. And the people that joined me in this journey early on deeply believe in that as well, right? And, we chose a certain set of values that we want to follow, and those we practice very deeply, right? So, like culture and values are not something that you put up on a wall, or on a slide deck. It's what happens day to day when nobody's watching, right? So that's what really culture and values are. So if that is strong, then the new people that you bring in, there'll be an automatic self-selection, right? Because I'm not going to be the one hiring people all the time, right? Like there'll be other people that will be hiring. So they'll automatically look for people who fit into that. When those people come into the organization, they'll start practicing those. And thus the engine gets created, and thus the propagation of these things happen. And so your way of doing things, right? So for us, let's say if quality is extremely important, right? So that message gets percolated. Everybody will do things that way, right? So, and these people are the ones who will then put in place the processes, the systems, build the technology, build the necessary apparatus to have the thing percolate and subsist over a period of time, right? And if the stories that get told, right, of what gets celebrated, what gets reprimanded, right? So those are all the things that keep taking this forward. So ultimately, you want this aspect, the culture, the values, the way of doing things to get so solidly codified that it then doesn't depend on any specific individual, right? So I think that's where you want to get to. But I believe, at least I don't know if it'll happen in our lifetime, where things will stop depending on people. I think that everything is all about the people. And if you get that part right early on, and if you can keep that without diluting, that actually, holds us in very good stead. And that definitely has been the case for us.
Excellent. Couldn't have said it any better. I think one thing that caught my attention is the summary that you had in the end. The founders need to sort of codify the DNA, the culture, the way of doing things in a way that, when you do bring the right set of people, and it becomes a way of life, it becomes a second nature. And
how do decisions get taken, right?
Yeah,
So what are values? Ultimately, they are a framework for taking decisions.
Yep.
Right. And if those are strongly and implemented and enforced, and everybody watches that, right, and they'll follow that framework. So that's what values do. They give you a framework for making decisions.
Yep. Excellent. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Sajid, coming to you, and a little bit of a change of track here. We often believe, and we often say as well, it's important to play long game, and there are oftentimes many temptations for a founder as they embarking on entrepreneurial journey to pivot to potentially a short-term gain, and some of them are external driven as well. And when I say external, it could be the board driven, board comprising some investors who have their own their own objectives that they need to fulfill for their LPs. And in a few interactions, when I speak to some entrepreneurs, they are very clear about where they want to go, what their North Star is, and they have a vision clarity. But again, they struggle. They grapple with this dynamic of having to get a board aligned to how they want to do it in terms of where they want to get to. So they have to make in some cases those short-term trade-offs for short-term gains, and potentially jeopardizing their long-term thing, and that might come in the way of building a sustainable business as well. So I know you're probably smack in the middle of all this stuff. As a VC, you sit in a few boards as advisor or a board member. What's your take? How do you sort of help the startups make a right strike a right balance?
Tricky question, Ravi. You kept the hardest question for the VC. So that's a fair question. It's a good question. I would say that a good VC doesn't let his or her founder trade off long-term sustainability for anything short-term. The best VCs don't do that. And as someone who's still learning my way through venture, I've only been here for 5 years, and the VCs I look up to never do that. That said, there's also a peculiar construct in our industry that I come in at a certain stage. Bloom, as a seed investor, comes in at a certain stage. and we then look to, at a certain stage, hand it over. And it's not hand it over, it's not when I sell my shares, but I bring in a Series A or a Series B investor to come in, because the company has reached a certain scale. It needs a certain expertise, which I don't have. My strength may be strongly in getting them to PMF. The next set of person's strength is, how do you expand to another country? How do you bring in a CFO? How do you put in governance, etc.? And then so on and so forth, right? So there are downstream investors, all the way through Series F these days, I'm told, So I would say that we as early stage investors look to our downstream investors for the signals that they're giving. If the downstream investors say, hey, we are okay with this business, okay, and then we'll say, sure, we would like you to come aboard. Typically, downstream investors are very careful. They tend to be more careful about unit economics, contribution margins, etc. Because as you get closer and closer downward, you got to know that you're taking the company to an IPO. But 2021, the entire world went crazy, right? So when they went crazy, the signals that were coming from downstream investors was, we are going to invest in whatever you bring, right? We earlier, if, for example, you at 750K SaaS revenue, you were getting, for example, Series A. Now at 300, they were saying, no, just we're going to come in. And at that point, what happens is when the signals come like this, then it becomes very difficult. And sometimes, yes, I would say that we were not able to stress long-term sustainability at that point. But that said, again, I think that era is over. And if anything, we have come back to the path of long-term sustainability. So typically, it doesn't vary. Short-term and long-term sustainability go hand in hand, it's dovetailed. Sometimes it goes crazy. That era is past. Last point is that, and I go back to what Kunal said, it was a very good talk. I think I missed something very interesting. I'll probably go back and listen to the entire thing. He said something very interesting. He said, your shares are the most highest value item that you're going to sell if you look at yourself as an enterprise company. If so, what you're selling, you want to pick the right customers. Similarly, the best founders pick the right investors. And they say, if an investor comes and says, grow, and if the founder, he or she feels that's not in the best interest of my company, should actually encourage the investor to say, maybe we're not the right ones for you. It may not be easy in certain contexts and circumstances, but the good founders do that actually. The good founders push back and say, my business cannot grow at 40% or 60% or 80% quarter on quarter. It's a different business. And so I think it's up to the founder as much to kind of push back. So these are, I think, the points I wanted to say, that typically they're dovetailed. The best VCs don't encourage trade-offs, but there are times when they do happen. Yes, it did happen in 2021, but now things are back to normal, and founders have a responsibility to push and select the right investors for their journey as well.
No,
Can I add
very well
to this?
Yeah, please, Mohan, please go ahead.
Yeah. So, the point that I wanted to make is that, short-term and long-term is actually highly dependent on what is the actual business you are in. Okay. So not every business is, destined to be a unicorn, right? Not every business is destined to be a sustainable business, right? I think, you're from the Valley, you'll know this, right? How many businesses have been built purely to be sold to Cisco? Okay. How many businesses have been built by very smart people purely to be sold to Intel or to Oracle, right? So those are great businesses, but those are not independently sustainable businesses, but they were built with that awareness, right? If there is a very established ecosystem of enterprise sales that Cisco has built in the networking industry, it doesn't make any sense for any startup that is making networking equipment or networking services or software to actually go build that ecosystem. There is a ready ecosystem. You're building a new feature or you're building a new aspect that is being offered, and you go plug into that ecosystem. So in that situation, using the least amount of money required to create that and to sell it to Cisco for $200 million, $300 million is a phenomenal outcome, right? Same, how many companies do you know that Google on average has acquired one startup a week, okay, between 2010 and 2020. Most of those don't get reported at all, right? Because there's an ecosystem that's already been developed, right? So I think that strategic awareness of what is it that you are creating. Is this a feature in an ecosystem? Is this a product that fits into an ecosystem, or is it something that is enough of a market, a big enough market? Is it a new market? Is it an existing market? Is it a market that is going to grow, or is it a mature market that's not going to grow? Are you going to grow by taking share, or are you going to grow because there is some new thing like an iPhone, smartphone that has come that is actually creating a new, generation of products and services? So having that strategic awareness of what is it that you're doing is extremely important. And second is the confidence to act on it. Okay. Now I'm sitting here and saying this, right? Fully aware that in my first startup, I didn't do any of this. I didn't, me and the team didn't have the confidence. We basically did what our VCs told us to do, and we made tons of mistakes, right? But, so for first time founders, this is going to be very hard to actually, even if they have the strategic awareness, to have the confidence to act on it. But if you can build that confidence and conviction of knowing truly what is your market, if you're building a two-sided marketplace, it makes sense to burn money fast, and build those two-sided marketplace, because it becomes a huge moat, right? Whereas if you're building a service, if you're building something that is not a non-linear growth thing, it doesn't make sense to burn a lot of money fast. Right. So, if you're building something where you're creating a new distribution channel that makes very difficult for others to recreate, then it makes sense to burn money fast. So I think but what I saw happen in the last 5-7 years is that every business got looked at the same way. Everybody wanting to become a unicorn and everybody spending money, without being acutely aware of what is their target market. And again, Kunal made another excellent point, I thought, which is that just because you're good at something, because people are putting the pressure of you becoming a unicorn, you're getting into 5 other areas where you have no advantage whatsoever. Okay. And all you're going to go do is burn money there and get your ass handed to you. Right. So whereas if you had stuck to your one thing, okay, maybe you would have actually created $100 million company by using only $10 million, and more power to you. That should be celebrated. Right. Whereas no, unless you created a unicorn, nobody, cares. And that's kind of the narrative that got built. So I think I just wanted to make this point that there is no one formula that applies to every business. Knowing what makes sense to your business and having that acute awareness, or, the strategic awareness, I use that term, I think makes all the difference.
No, the pearls of wisdom, for sure. With it's hard for me to believe that you did not have the science side knowledge back when you were building your first thing, but it's certainly bringing all that to the fore and to the table here for the budding entrepreneurs. I think the point I need to highlight in your articulation is the entrepreneur or a founder being acutely aware of the broader ecosystem and the thing that he or she is embarking on, the relevance, how it fits in the grand scheme of things. And then sustainability or a long-term view should be looked through that lens and make appropriate decision versus going with this blanket approach. I am building for a unicorn or XYZ. That's a great point. And going back to what you said, Sajid, that you should comfort many founders as well in terms of what you said, how the VC ecosystem is panning out or evolving. There are folks out there may not have an appetite to stay the course, given whatever commitments they have with LPs. They are fully cognizant and they're very transparent, saying, "Oh, this is not our cup of tea. This is what we are good at." Finding founders who are passionate about solving this problem in a 0 to 1 space. Once the PMF is attained, there are other folks downstream who are ready to look at this problem and help you along the way. Both in terms of capital and other intangibles that they bring to the table for the founder to succeed. I think, the founder should look at that as well. And I think it's very comforting, very comforting. Mohan, should I leave you with some more time to catch your breath, or I have another question? I'm going to.
No, it's fine.
I know that was a very passionate articulation. I really liked it. This one is about going back to building a sustainable financial base model or a revenue model or a business model. I wanted to understand from you as you build some great businesses, the importance of founders, to be looking at establishing multiple revenue channels in the form of new customers or new monetization. Sometimes the monetization models, it could be different as well from what you started to what it should be in future. New sales channels, some new adjacencies in terms of new adjacency products and services, and things of that nature. So how important that is for a business to be sustainable. And I'm sure you've done some of this stuff yourself as you build some great businesses.
Yeah. So the way I think about it is that if you have a successful product or service, right, one that has found product market fit, one that has scaled, one that has actually is doing well, and hopefully it has a growth path ahead of it, right? So it hasn't gotten into saturation in the market, So when you have something like that, anytime you add another product, right? If it is an immediate adjacencies that you're selling to the same customer base, then I won't consider that as a new thing. It's just an extension. But if you're adding a new line of products or a new, right, you're actually taking on risk. You're actually taking on new risk, right? And the reward has to be worth it, right? So what does that mean? That means that you have to apply the same diligence and rigor to decide that as you did when you did the first one, right? Because unlike a lot of people who think of startups as and entrepreneurs as being in the risk-taking business, I actually think entrepreneurs are in the risk-mitigating business. Okay, so the highest risk that you have is the day you start. Right, the day you quit your other job or whatever it is, and you gave up on your opportunity cost, and you got into this and hired and brought in your first few people, that is when the risk is the maximum, right? After that, you're using all of your intellect, your energy, your team, your network, the capital that you raise, all of that you're using to actually reduce the risk and create a successful product. So now when you add a new line of business to it, then you're actually taking that risk all over again. This time it may be a little lesser because you've built more capabilities. Okay, so I would ask the same question. Do you have any edge? Do you have any advantage in this? Right? Do you have any defensible, sustainable, competitive advantage in this new line of business? Does your existing business give you those advantages? Okay, if it gives you those advantages, either because you built a certain distribution, or you built certain technology, or you built certain, intellectual property, any of those things, then it makes a lot of sense. But adding businesses or adding business lines for the sake of doing it, I think doesn't make any sense. Right now, if you have made commitments to investors, and if you have gone and raised money at very high valuation, then you may not have a choice but to actually take more risk and going into areas that you don't have competitive advantage in, and that is actually a value destructive step, in my opinion. Right, you basically took something that is creating real good value and has reduced the risk and is the risk reward balance is in your favor. And then you're actually now going into something where the risk reward ratio is against you and has actually made the whole thing less valuable, in my opinion. Right. So I think to the extent that you have the competitive advantage in that new line of business, you should absolutely do it. I'll give you an example. In our case, we started with the mid-career segment, upskilling for mid-career segment, people who have been in a certain job for a while, for many years, and are stagnating there. Okay, because the nature of jobs are changing, the nature of their work is changing. Unless they build new skills, they can't move beyond, right? They're stuck. That was our initial segment. So everything that we did was catered towards those, answering the questions that were their concerns, right? So as we did that, we saw that there were people from the younger ages that were coming into and buying our products and services, right? So, and when we saw those, then we said, okay, these people are coming, but they actually have different requirements, right? They are not as independent. They're not as disciplined. They're not as, rigorous they're still used to bad habits from college. So we said that, okay, let us cater to these people also. Our strength is that we know how learning works because we've learned that in that segment. We know how to deliver high quality learning outcomes. We know how to do that at scale. So we use those to cater to the early career segment as well. Similarly, we were finding that there were older people coming into our products as well, and realize that they have different needs. They are not going to sit and write code, right? They are used to managing teams of people who do these things. So we created separate products which are derivatives meeting their specific needs. Right. Similarly, we found that there were people from Singapore and Dubai, others coming into our programs, right? And these are the early adopters. But from that, we learned that okay, there is people in other geographies and in other markets. It makes sense to cater to them specifically, right? So similar, that's how we went to the United States as well, right? So I think I think it pays to very carefully listen to what the market is telling you. Usually, the market / your customers will give you hints, right, for you to find those next set of products or next set of if you want to go into something completely new, then you better have something damn good that is a source of competitive advantage. And if you don't have anything, that's when you go with just capital.
Yeah, absolutely. I think again, I'm sort of summarizing for the audience one more time. I think the idea of building new products, it should be first looked at through the lens of figuring out some of the core building blocks that you built, and having a deeper understanding of your customer segments, and at the intersection of these two, can there be new adjacencies that you can look at, and they are largely derivatives of what you built as a core. That should be our first focus, as opposed to looking at a brand new thing, unless of course you have a very distinct competitive advantage, it's the untapped market. Again, even then it offers its own set of challenges. You're going looking at some unknown, all said and done. So that's very well put. I think that's a great point, excellent point. Just a little bit of dovetail into what Mohan said, a role of continuous innovation to drive sustainability in a business. Rajiv, what's your take? I think it nicely dovetails into what Mohan said. While you may be looking at same set of products, same customers segments, but what worked today may not work tomorrow. There's always the competition lurking. So the innovation, you need to be on the innovation treadmill, and what's the role that innovation plays?
Absolutely. So, just to build on what Mohan was talking about, right, so there are two things that can happen. One, in the external environment, the forces have changed so much that you have to reinvent. There's no other option. Second is you build some capabilities that you can extend, right, and create more value off of. In both of these cases, completely agree with Mohan that whatever you're trying to do, make sure that there is sustainable competitive advantage. Otherwise, you are risking what you've started with and getting into an unknown territory where the competitive set could be completely different, and you have opened your battle lines across multiple channels, right? So that's an important one. So talking about the space we are into experiential learning. We create simulation-based learning for large organizations to upskill and reskill people at scale, create impact at scale. So what I find is, in terms of innovation in this space, there are usually the 6 C's that we care about. The first one, the more obvious one, is content itself, right? And content itself, when you think about it, it's morphing, right? So you maybe back in the day there was e-learning, and then there was mobile learning, and a lot of those changes have happened in terms of what that core content is. Second is the context. When you're selling to a B2B audience, their context is continuously changing. So you need to keep innovating on the context as well, not just the content. It may not work after some time. Then the channels, right? Today, you need to reach, learners, especially in the hybrid work environment. You need to be able to reach people through multiple channels. And from a learning standpoint, I find that communities are important. That's the 4th C. It's not just about an individual learning. How do you increase efficacy of learning through communities? Then you've got curriculum, or the course material itself, right? So curriculum is, how do you structure it in a way that can be consumed well? And even in this, the format of learning is undergoing a change, just like in cricket, from test matches to one-day international to T20. The format is changing a lot, right? So, unless you keep innovating on that front, we might be left behind. The last one is consumption, right? And so ultimately you have great content, like, courses from great places and all of that. But then Is it consumed? End of the day, there is problem of plenty today, right? Do we understand the psyche of the learner to innovate at the edge to make sure that consumption is also happening well? And the latest entrant, we all know, we cannot have a panel these days without talking about Chat GPT. Right. So if you think about the disruptive power of that in the learning space, right? So the other day I was looking at, can you create a session plan for customer centricity? There it was, right? 1 day session plan, a 3-hour session plan. No, I don't want this. I want a 2-day session plan. It can create it for you. Can I get a case study on an automobile company that is facing labor union problems? There you go. You got that in place. So I think that's very tough in terms of content creation and also the role of AI in creating deep immersive experiences. And that's close to the space we operate in. Today, we talk about metaverses, right? So and it's no longer cool if we just talk about simulations. People want the next thing in terms of, hey, do you have the same thing in metaverses? So there's no end to all of this. I think it comes back to what is real for your business. And ultimately, there is an innovation diffusion curve. You don't want to go too ahead of time, and you don't want to lag behind. So, and that's the strategy here, right? It's not always important to be the first person to be innovating, but after you have seen enough success in that, could just be your strategy, right? When do you want to get into that innovation ring? Is where the strategy lies. But across all these 6 C's in the edtech space, there is enough and more to be done in today's context.
Excellent. Thank you. I don't know how we are doing on time. I do have one other question, and then I don't know if there are any questions that are coming up. We could also look at those. But I have one question, but I get a ping from Nishit that we are running out of time. But can we take one question, or should we wrap it up now? I don't know if Nishit is... Oh, yeah, he's saying please close. So I do have a couple more questions, but I think this is a very enthralling, engaging conversation, and truly an eclectic panel. And people who've been there, done that, and seen different perspectives, and all the participants and all the audience participating in this session, and me included. Very grateful to all three of you, Mohan, Sajid, and Rajiv. Really enjoyed this engaging conversation and some great insights, and a lot to glean from this panel discussion for the entrepreneurs, and hopefully they find it as exciting, as insightful as I found it on this conversation. Yeah.
Thanks, Ravi. Thanks, team NIIT, for putting this together.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. That was really an engaging and enriching session. May I now request Mr. Vijay Thadani, co-founder NIIT Group, and Professor Rajesh Khanna, President NIIT University, for the official launch of the second cohort of the Founders Growth Camp.
Yeah, Vijay, you're on mute. You need to unmute and then.
Good evening. I think as we reach the end of day's play, very, very interesting day indeed. And before there is an appeal for bad light, I just thought I will talk about the Founders Growth Camp, which is a follow-up of the interesting sessions that we had. Very, very engaging and enriching sessions with founders, with funders, and moderators. I think beautifully done. Just to put the growth camp in a perspective, I think we were talking about unicorns earlier in the conversation. NIIT itself became a unicorn the way we describe unicorns in 1997. But we've been chasing a unicorn of a different kind. And that is a unicorn, a billion people that we would be able to reach, and a billion people that we would be able to teach. So reach a billion, teach a billion is what we've been chasing, and in 40 years plus have done about 40 million people. And therefore, to fill that gap, we did feel that we need many more edtech companies, and we need many more people engaged in education, because that's not only a big opportunity, but we have that as a responsibility to the great nation that we belong to, which not only to service the nation, but to service the rest of the world. So in that context, we do want to get like-minded edtech entrepreneurs to come together, and we would like to invest time with them and set up this this growth camp, which brings forward the responsibility that we have to our customer, which is the learner, not only in terms of the money that we charge him, but also the time and the opportunity that we deny him in case we don't service him well. The profession that we belong to, which Raji quickly talks about regulation and the threat, where I think the credibility of this profession is very important. And the community that we belong to of so many other edtech entrepreneurs who are pursuing a similar dream. And the idea is that all those who are dreaming of being a part of this and contribute to this, not only get the telescopic vision that you had before you walked into today's session, the binoculars that you got as you were engaged in this session, the binocular vision that you got as you were engaged in the session, now to the microscopic detail, which is required when the rubber meets the road. That is when you actually start setting up your venture and you grow further. So all these pearls of wisdom that we got this afternoon, how do we put them in practice, is what the Founders Growth Camp is all about. And that is a sequel to this virtual summit that we had just now. That's a physical event, which we would like to do at the beautiful site, which is in my background, which is the NIT University campus. And it is at this place that we had a growth camp last year as well, where we had 9 interesting startups spend nearly 2.5 days with us. And in that process, there was an exchange of knowledge, there was mentoring, and then there were funding opportunities that came up. In addition to that, an unexpected benefit was a good recruitment opportunity for them to work with NIT University students, whom we fondly call Newtons, to intern with them, to help them, and maybe even spin off some more ventures in that process. The setting of this university is very different. It is very conducive to the thinking that is required to think of a large startup that each one of us dream of, or the startups that will make a huge difference and add value to our customers. And it's done under the auspices of Center of Innovation, Incubation, and Entrepreneurship, CIIE, the part of the NIT University. And this will be by invitation only session. And last time, as I mentioned, we had 9 entrepreneurs whom we worked with. And in this environment, we are hoping that we would be able to get a much better participation this time, much richer participation. We have also planned a much more enriching program in terms of master classes, in terms of demo days, and in terms of some opportunities to not only receive mentoring advice, but also funding opportunities like we had in the last session, when nearly 6 startups are in active discussions for partnering and funding. 4 of them actually were able to get more than 1.6 crores of Microsoft Foundation Hub benefits. And we believe that the same opportunities will be available this time also for those who participate. So I would now hand you over to Professor Rajesh Khanna, who's the Vice Chancellor and President of NIT University, to tell you a little bit more about the setting and what we are going to do. But looking forward to a very, very successful Founders Growth Camp at our campus on from 5th to 7th April. And it's a by invitation only event. So please do get in touch with our team to get more details.
Yeah. Thank you, Vijay. And I invite people to come and visit this beautiful campus, even otherwise, if you're just taking a trip to Jaipur or even to Nimrana or to any other place and are listening to me, this is a wonderful place and a very healthy place and very conducive to learning, as Vijay said. And it's a very, very interesting setup here. It's fully residential. We have about 1,000 students here, and they play, they learn, they enjoy, they come to classes, they do all kind of activities. And if you see the hill behind us, that hill used to be brown when this university was being built, and now it is green. It's by a lot of effort from the students here. So it would be a very, very interesting experience for everyone just to see how we can sustain and how we can, in our own small way, make a difference to how people learn and how people see the challenges of learning, of sustainability, of technology, including technology for our benefit. So if you're listening to me, please come and visit. And this Founders Growth Camp will, of course, be a very dedicated, very intense exercise where the energy of the founders will meet the rigor of the university. And so the things, it's a very complementary thing, because one thing that is very much associated with all the founders is, university dropout. That it's not very difficult to see that. But I'm so grateful to the people who spoke today, who discussed today, to bring back the belief in the core values of growth. And one underlining theme of all the discussions was that peoples matter, the values matter, and you do things the right way. And for a brief while, I've been following startup cultures, many startups, and talking to young students. And for a while, it looked like that something else has taken over and some kind of madness was going on. But today's sessions, bring back the belief that it is possible to be successful and to hold on to the values. And that is very, very important if we want to do something for future, because some anchor needs to be there. And for a while, the way things are moving, it looked like that the anchors are not there. But now it's the same old, things that we do, and we do it well. And of course, the technology has changed, the market has changed, the people have changed, all that changes, but the core values remain the same. So that's very heartening. And I also look forward to meeting the startup founders and the experts and the master classes and the students. And that is where the real sustainability comes from. And it comes from people and the students who are in the universities now. So thank you very much. Thanks for this wonderful session. And I thank everyone who participated in this. And over to you, Neha.
Thank you, sir. Now it is the time for short video catching up the glimpses of last year's Founders Growth Camp. With this, we have come to the end of the proceedings of the day. To register for second Edtech Founders Growth Camp, please visit the Edtech Growth website. You can also register through the link sent in the notification. Thank you all for joining us.